This is a Bahá'í-inspired series called Racial Healing, Racial Justice. And this was started by the Baha'is of Wacomico County, Maryland, which is near or includes Salisbury, Maryland. Some of you may be familiar with that. And we're delighted to have friends participating in this series. We started last July, and it was the outgrowth of wanting to do a devotional on a regular basis. Once a month wasn't enough. We said we needed to do it twice a month. And we also wanted to address issues of race. And this coincided with George Floyd, and of course, these moving letters from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and from the Universal House of Justice on the issues of race. So what our program for tonight, we're going to have a devotional portion, which will start in just a moment. We're starting a couple of new practices, so I'd like to describe them briefly. Two things we invite you to do during the chat. One is to identify the Indian territory upon which you are living and breathing. Now, I've sent out an email with that information for folks where you could easily look that up. I'll include it again. I know many of you are new, so you probably don't know how to do that. All you need is your zip code. And it's a wonderful way for us to honor our Indigenous family members. The other thing that we do at the beginning as well, and throughout the devotional portion, if you wish, is to call in our ancestors. And with that, we're going to start the presentation with a quotation read by Nason Sturdivant, and our closing for the devotional portion and moving into the program with Todd and Phyllis will be signaled with Angela Ewing Boyd giving us a wonderful guided meditation. So with that, Nason, when you're ready, please. And utilize the chat. The chat will be closed after the devotional portion.
Who have passed on through death have a sphere of their own. It is not removed from ours, their work. The work of the kingdom is ours. But it is sanctified from what we call time and place. Those who have ascended have different attributes from those who are still on earth. Yet there is no real separation. In prayer, there is a mingling of station, a mingling of condition. Pray for them as they pray for you. When you do not know it and are in a receptive attitude, they are able to make suggestions to you if you are in difficulty. Those who have passed on through death have a sphere of their own. It is not removed from ours. Their work, the work of the kingdom, is ours. But it is sanctified from what we call time and place. Those who have ascended have different attributes from those who are still on earth. Yet there is no real separation. In prayer, there is a mingling of station, a mingling of condition. Pray for them as they pray for you. When you do not know it and are in a receptive attitude, they are able to make suggestions to you if you are in difficulty.
prescriptions. He gives me all of my medicine in the prayer room, in the prayer room. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Baha'u'llah is my doctor. He writes up all of my prescriptions. He gives me all of my medicine in the prayer room, in the prayer room. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Baha'u'llah is my doctor. He writes up all of my prescriptions. He gives me all of my medicine in the prayer room, in the prayer room.
All the worshipers on say God is the true one, and all pay homage unto. This is God your Lord, to him concerning God. He hath created you and all things. The Lord of all worlds is he. Say, God is the Lord, and all the worshipers unto him. Say, God is the true one, and all pay homage unto him. This is God your Lord, and unto him shall ye return. Is there any doubt concerning God? He hath created you and all things. The Lord of all worlds is he. The Lord of all worlds is he. The Lord of all worlds is he. Ya Baha'u'llah, Ya Aliyullah, Ya Baha'u'llah, Ya Aliyullah.
in ourselves and in all we can touch. The time for transformation is now. I think there is a Baha'i prayer that can offer us guidance, strength, and determination. It is prayer which talks about protest, it talks about faith, and it talks about progress. And it goes, quote, O God, aid thy servants to raise up the word, to refute what is vain and false, to establish the truth, to spread the sacred verses abroad, and to make the morning's light to dawn in the hearts of the righteous. And I don't know what we're waiting for, but we should be galvanized into action, because now is the time. As the saying goes, if not now, when?
So I like when I do these guided meditations to imagine that we are dropping into this space of increased connection to our divine source, a space prepared by our ancestors and the concourse on high who are holding this space with us. Because while this work is done on earth, it requires heavenly transformation. So I also just wanted to name that this group is meeting together on the eve of the continuation of the unrest that began on January 6th. So this is just momentous timing. During the meditation, any guidance I provide is a suggestion only. We are each creators of this space and of our internal space. So if something that I suggest doesn't feel safe or right, you can come out of this practice at any time. And in fact, feel free to turn off your camera during the meditation if that feels more comfortable to you. The intention of this meditation is to invite spaciousness and openness, to allow ourselves to be aware of what God, the revealer of truth, is asking of us, what he is asking us to see, what he is asking us to hear, what he is asking us to be and do in this moment. And in this expanded space of openness, we attain a greater understanding of truth. So now I invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze. We'll take just a moment to come more fully into this space, because it's so easy when there's a lot going on, especially tonight, to be in 10 different places and 10 different conversations. And we won't try to quiet all the chatter, but just allow some of it to fall away. Whenever you find your mind wandering, lovingly invite it back to the breath or to the sound of my voice. Now allow your feet to make full contact with the floor if you're in a chair, or just establish connection and solidarity with the earth below. Allow your weight to sink into the points of contact between your body and the floor or the chair. Find some length in your spine as you make space for deeper breaths. We sit taller so that our lungs can expand more completely. Allow your shoulders to come up, roll back, and then melt down and away from your ears. Perhaps you want to turn your palms up, resting them on your legs in a gesture of receiving and letting go, or turn them down for grounding. We begin with an awareness of our own dignity and vast consciousness. Let us allow our breath to deepen and carry us to an increased state of calm and attunement. So breathing in deeply and breathing out slowly. Again, breathing in deeply and out slowly. Aware of breath, body, heart. In touch with our nobility. In touch with all nobility. Again, breathing in deeply. Breathing out slowly. And then just allowing your breath to return to its normal rhythm, its natural pace. And tuning into the feeling of the breath in the body. Just notice the physical sensations of rising and falling. And if it helps with your concentration, you can just say the short phrase, rising with every in-breath and then falling with every out-breath. Breathing at your own pace for the next few moments. We begin to drop even more deeply into this present moment. And in this present moment, we have the ability to cultivate compassion. Compassion is a necessary step in becoming more receptive to truth. Allow this compassion to carve out space for truth. Without compassion, we feel as though we simply do not have the strength or courage to meet this truth, speak this truth, or act on this truth. Expand compassion for yourself as you breathe in. Release any blockages to compassion as you breathe out. On your next breath in, send compassion to those on this walk beside you tonight. On your out breath, release whatever is not serving you in this connection. Now I invite you to maybe bring your hands to heart center as you draw your attention to your heart space, to the center of your chest, and feel a softening and warmth with every beat of your heart. A pulsation of this heat of compassion, of softening, spreading outward from this center. First, notice in subtle ways. Perhaps the noticing begins with the awareness of the beat, of the pulse of your heart. And then maybe this warmth, this softening begins to accompany the beat. Allowing it to radiate out in all directions, emanating from the center of your heart. The center of our being, this seat of compassion holds deep acceptance. It holds the truth. Our heart is kind. It offers space for truth to be revealed. all can be held in this space of compassion, in this space of courage. Now we inquire into this truth, the truth about what is yet unknown, what is incomplete or unsaid, what is undone on our path towards justice. We find ourselves open to speaking what is true. We find ourselves open to hearing what is true and staying with this truth, even as it unmoors us from what we thought was real. And for Black, Indigenous, and people of color folks, we also ask how truth can show us how to take care of ourselves as we acknowledge what is required to show up in this work. We all settle into this intention of openness to what will reveal itself to our spirits. And now in the space of compassion that we have created, observe an expansion of your capacity to hold truth. Ask yourself, what would divine truth have me to do? In holding this inquiry, holding this space of compassion, remain present and allow the answers to reveal themselves. Now and for the remainder of the evening. As we close the practice, we commit to remaining in a spirit of open inquiry. As these truths begin to show themselves, no matter how difficult, we stay with them. As they come to our awareness, we simply meet them with thank you, I love you. As we find ourselves coming ever closer to embodying justice. Now, if your eyes are closed, gently flutter them open. If your camera is off, turn it back on. And we will take 3 collective breaths to seal this practice. If you'd like, you can bring your hands back to heart center. Breathing in deeply and clearing as you exhale audibly. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Biggest breath of the evening. Breathe in through your nose and sigh out whatever is not in service to this moment. I'll take the next few seconds just to take a moment and look around at whoever's present with you and smile with your face or with your eyes. Just notice who this wonderful collection of people are who are standing with you tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Angela. That was absolutely wonderful. And I have to thank everyone this evening that gave us this beautiful devotional portion. Angela Ewing Boyd, Chuck Hendrickson, and Regina Yonker, and Nason Sturdivant. And I also want to thank Nason and Jillian, as well as Todd and Phyllis for providing the initial quote and preparing it so nicely for us to see and hear this evening. I'm going to introduce our speakers now. They did tell me, however, they like to introduce each other. So I'm not going to say very much about them at all. I'm going to let them do that themselves. But if you would like their bios, you have them in all the beautiful detail, all the service these two wonderful human beings have given to North America and Canada over the years. That information is included in the event notice and in the emails for those of you on the email list. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Phyllis. And thank you so much for coming and for being here and selecting. Todd had his choice of dates. Todd and Phyllis had their choice of dates, the 30th or tonight. And he said, no, this is Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. It has to be now. So what better time than now? Thank you. Todd.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank everybody. Thank our dear daughter, Angela Ewing Boyd. I love you so much. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful I got to be one of your parents. Praise God. I'm kind of still in this meditation space, a little tearful, a little moved by everything that's happened already so far. So I'm slowly moving into introducing. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Slowly moving into introducing my friend and co-worker, et cetera, Phyllis Unterschütz. We've chosen to introduce ourselves in a particular way tonight, very succinct. So I'd like to introduce Phyllis Unterschütz, who strives to maintain a posture of humility and remain in a learning mode, to understand her noble role as a white woman in addressing race within the broad framework of the community building process, and who strives to serve this role in relationship to the guidance of the Universal House of Justice. She comes to you not as an expert, but in the spirit of this quotation, which is really a cornerstone quotation for the entire community building process. Souls then advance their understanding together, humbly sharing the insights each possesses at a given moment, and eagerly seeking to learn from fellow wayfarers on the path of service. End of quote. Welcome, Phyllis.
Thank you, Todd. And I would like to introduce to you my friend, my colleague, Mr. Todd Ewing, who strives to maintain a posture of humility, remain in a learning mode, who strives to understand his noble role as a Black man in addressing race, and to serve in this role in relationship to the guidance of the House of Justice. He also comes to you not as an expert, but in the spirit of this quotation. Baha'u'llah was often heard to say, there are 4 qualities which I love to see manifested in people. First, enthusiasm and courage. Second, a face wreathed in smiles and a radiant countenance. Third, that they see with their own eyes and not through the eyes of others. And fourth, the ability to carry a task once begun through to its end. Welcome, Todd. Thank you for the gift of bringing me along with you on this journey.
Praise God for all of it. Praise God for all of it. So one of the things I want to acknowledge, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, which Sherilyn has acknowledged for certainly the sacrifices he made, but also to bring him in the house tonight, to bring him here with us, to help us on this journey, to bring his spirit, to bring his energy, eloquence, insight, passion to all of us, an ancestor. And at the same time, lesser known. And I'm only going to call on one person who is lesser known, who really, without this person, we don't know if we would have known Dr. Martin Luther King in the Montgomery bus boycott. Her name was Joanne Robinson, and she was responsible, an African-American woman responsible for so much of the organizing that led up to the Montgomery bus boycott. And her name has been lost in history for a lot of people. I think it's very important that as truth is emerging everywhere, that the truth of these, in this case, particularly African-American women who have been at the forefront of the courage of this country forever, they continue to be more and more acknowledged. And so I want to say the name Joanne Robinson. You can look her up if you don't know her name. And also just a word about Dr. Austin. She was in the slide, and she was the first African-American woman on the National Spiritual Assembly, I believe, of the Bahá'í in the United States, and just a powerful force in the universe. So I just wanted to say her name and call on her in this space. And I loved when she called that a protest prayer, along with the other things that she said. So again, welcome with those acknowledgements. And let me just say this. There's so many people on this call I could acknowledge and say something about, but I saw Gwen Eder-Lewis. And Gwen, I'm going to call you out in a wonderful spirit, because the book Lights of the Spirit, I've been reading and reading word by word, page by page, minute by minute. And thank God you and Richard had the heart and soul to write that book, or we would have lost so much of our African-American heritage in the Baha'i community and in this country. And I every time I open the book, I haven't picked up the phone to call you, but I keep saying I'm going to pick up the phone and call you. So just thank you is really all I can say at this moment.
I wanted to say just a brief welcome to those of you on this call that are not Baha'is. I don't know how many of you are out there. I know I invited a bunch of folks. And so if you are not a Baha'i, please feel welcome. We're glad you're here in this space with us. You're going to be listening in on a Baha'i family conversation about race. There may be some things you don't understand, some terminology you're not familiar with. You'll hear us talk about the head of the faith, or the Universal House of Justice. This is our international governing body. You'll hear us talk about the community building process and core activities. And this is a model of capacity building and education, spiritual and material advancement that the Universal House of Justice has given us. So we'll be referring to that. So please, if you hear things that are confusing or unknown to you, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards individually and ask for clarity. And again, welcome, and I hope you find this interesting.
Okay, so friends, just setting, the tone has already been set for this space, but just know that when we come into a space and we're going to talk about race, when we talk about race, one of the things that Phyllis and I have often said is that people are often on a continuum. You come to a space, and some people in this space are in tremendous pain right now, right this minute as we speak, for racial reasons, for the unrest in the country, all that. And they bring that pain to this space. There's other people that are in this space that are thinking about, yes, there's craziness going on in the world and there's racism, but we have so many possibilities, and they're thinking in terms of possibilities, and maybe they've been in pain and they don't want to be there right now. So they want to think of possibilities. So we've got people on that spectrum. We've got people on that continuum of pain and possibilities in this space. We just want to acknowledge that. In our workshops, we have an exercise we do to acknowledge that. We can't do it in this space, but please, in the spirit of the meditation that Angela did, make room for those who are in pain and possibilities, and may even flip back and forth on this very call. And in that spirit, we want to remind all of us of this wonderful passage that the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is in the United States wrote in a February 25th, 2017 letter, when they talked about how we needed to engage with race. and how we needed to discuss race. And I think when I read this passage, we'll realize that this passage is something we're all going to have to be working on from now and probably till the end of our lives. The House of Justice said is this, not the House of Justice, excuse me, the National Spiritual Assembly. The language we use and the attitudes we take, while not ignoring the harsh realities that exist in the world, should appeal to the nobler aspirations of our fellow citizens. The language we use and the attitudes we take, while not ignoring the harsh realities that exist in the world, should appeal to the nobler aspirations of our fellow citizens. So I invite you with me and with Phyllis to try to strike that balance, not only in this space, but in all the spaces that you might be in, because I think that's a balance I think we need to strike in addressing this challenging issue. And really, when the House of Justice, the Universal House of Justice, told the Baha'is on July 22nd, this last year, 2020, they talked about the Baha'is making a distinctive contribution. And it seemed to us, Phyllis and I, that a distinctive contribution, one distinctive contribution, would be striving together to balance these two sides of the coin, the harsh realities and the nobler aspirations. So just wanted to open with that. Do you want me to share this, Phyllis? I feel like I'm talking already too much.
Well, you know, I mean, I got your name highlighted all over this outline here. So
Oh, well, all right.
I've had it.
All right, all right, all right.
The goals, we're going to set the goals.
All right, so real briefly, the goals tonight, really, the point of this session is to continue to learn more and more about what the House of Justice is asking us to do when it comes to addressing race. We don't come as experts, we come to learn with you. And so really, it's not about the compilation that we put together. If the compilation helps people understand what the House of Justice is telling us about how to address race, then praise God, amen. But this session is really not focused on, oh, go buy this compilation and read it. If you think it will help you, then praise God, do it. If not, fine. Let's in this space just be here to learn. I just want to share a couple things that are in it, though, and from the point of just knowing some of the dynamics or some of the sections that are in this compilation. There's a focus on the centrality of oneness. The Universal House of Justice told us in the July 22nd message to meditate upon it and weigh its demanding implications for the profound alteration of thought and action. I'll read that again. The House of Justice, in talking about the oneness of humankind, told us to meditate upon it and to weigh its demanding implications for the profound alteration of thought and action required at this time. So part of the compilation is centered on that. It deals with the double crusade of addressing race in and outside the Baha'i community. It deals with justice. It deals with reaching the historically significant populations, including African Americans and indigenous people. It talks, there's a long section actually, because for so long, I feel like the indigenous people have been the forgotten minority, if you will. And so there's a long section talking about the importance of reaching the indigenous people. It deals with, it addresses how we should deal with, or can deal with the pain that we might experience around this issue. How to engage in social action and public discourse. What kind of agencies, organizations might the Baha'is associate with? The sensitivity from book 6 of the Ruhi curriculum, which talks about the importance of having sensitivity when we're working in communities of color. It deals with that whole issue. So there's a number of things in there that could be helpful in helping us understand what the House of Justice is asking us to do. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
So do you have that slide with the quote on the distinctive contribution?
I absolutely do.
I will read it. This is one of my favorite quotations of all times.
I'm not as adept as some people at these things, so just let me find it. That's not it. That's it.
The change required is not merely social and economic, but above all, moral and spiritual. Within the context of the framework governing your activities, it is necessary to carefully examine the forces unfolding around you. to determine where your energies might reinforce the most promising initiative, what you should avoid, and how you might lend a distinctive contribution. I'm gonna read that last part again. Within the context of the framework governing your activities, it is necessary to carefully examine the forces unfolding around you to determine where your energies might reinforce the most promising initiatives, what you should avoid, and how you might lend a distinctive contribution. So we're going to ask you to take just a minute right now and reflect on what a distinctive contribution might be that you could make. And we're not going to ask you to share at this point. We'll have some time later on where people will be invited to talk and share their thoughts. But right now, this is just for you. Just take a moment and reflect on what a distinctive contribution might look like for you.
And addressing race, correct?
Oh yeah, address.
Okay. Just to clarify.
I do believe, yeah.
Okay, so this idea, the House of Justice said a distinctive contribution. And we're saying that, we're giving you a minute, but what does that really mean? A distinctive contribution. This is what they said we have to make. And reflecting deeply on that point, I think we have to do every day. What makes our contribution distinct in this effort in addressing race? And I'm not always sure, honestly, but I think it's something we need to reflect on together. So one of the things
we won't come to that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
We won't come to that if we're not reading our reality.
Yeah, that's real.
We just won't be able to determine it,
So here's we thought about how to do the rest of this presentation, kind of a question and answer with each other, and we got to the end of what we wanted to do, and we said we might not get to this point. We might not get to the end of what we want to do. So we thought we would kind of start in the end, start with the finish, and one of the finishes is this, that the House of Justice, and I'm going to read this, when we think about the community building process and addressing race, part of addressing race is empowering populations, creating environments where we're empowering populations of color. It's about moving populations closer to Baha'u'llah. The ultimate goal of the Institute process and the community building process is to move entire populations. And so in this compilation, I said it this way: most importantly, the Institute and community building process are designed to create environments where entire populations, which clearly includes American Indians and African Americans as well as immigrant groups, can become further aligned with their highest and noblest selves through connection to the Word of God and in spaces where their souls and minds can thrive. These populations will choose paths of service that eventually create new realities of community life based on oneness, unity, and justice. The experience they gain and the knowledge they generate will be contributed to the global society, thus influencing its collective transformation. Indeed, many of the most significant advances in terms of the community building process worldwide are occurring among populations of color. Let me say that again. Indeed, many of the most significant advances in terms of the community building process worldwide are occurring among populations of color. So it can be said that the new civilization is already being shaped and led by their efforts. Let it be so in the United States as soon as possible. So when I realized that, and this is probably maybe obvious to the rest of you, but I've been around for a long time, and I never have really thought about that the entire civilization that's being shaped within the context of the community building process in terms of the places where it's growing the fastest are in communities of color. And so we thought, in the spirit of moving populations forward, because we want the same thing to happen in this country, we would start with this. And so I'm going to ask Gwen to read this if she's with us. Gwen, would you read this?
The problem of achieving racial unity, as both Shoghi Effendi and Abdu'l-Baha has always intimated, was not simply national in scope. As Dorothy Baker reported it, it was clearly related to a general shift in the balance of power from the old colonial regimes to their former subjects. Now, the dark-skinned people, Shoghi Effendi said, would have an upsurge that is both spiritual and social. The spiritual upsurge will rapidly bring them great gifts because this is an act of God and it is so intended. And all the world's prejudiced forces will not hold it back one hair's breadth. The Baha'is will glorify it and understand it. The social repercussions of race suppressions around the world will increase at the same time. And frightened, the world's forces will see that the dark-skinned peoples are really rising to the top, a cream that has latent gifts only to be brought out by divine bounties to move the world.
Phyllis, will you read that one?
For it should be borne in mind that until the present time, the majority of the followers of the faith have been of Aryan extraction, whereas the majority of the human race is not. I remember watching the face of the first Japanese Baha'i pilgrim, Shoghi Effendi, with those wonderfully expressive eyes of his fixed upon him, said that as the majority of the human race was not white, there was no reason why the majority of the Baha'is should be white. The emphasis and openness with which Shoghi Effendi stated this was clearly a revelation to this man from the Far East, who was returning from a protracted stay in the United States. And so that's from Ruhiya Khanum.
Please continue.
Will you give me the next slide?
Please.
Now you got to give me the next slide.
It's up.
Okay. Why did Shoghi Effendi keep and publish such exhaustive lists of the races and the tribes enlisted under the banner of the faith? Did he perhaps collect them each as a separate pearl to weave into precious adornments for the body of Baha'u'llah's cause? Why did he hang on the walls of the mansion in Baji a picture of the first pygmy Baha'i and the first descendant of the Inca Indians to accept the faith? Surely it was not as curiosities or trophies, but rather because the beloved Josephs of the world were coming home to the tent of their faith. So well I remember when Shoghi Effendi discovered that one of his pilgrims was a descendant of the old royal family of Hawaiian kings. He seemed to radiate with a joy and delight that was almost tangible. And this glow enveloped a man whose portion in life had been mostly compounded of scorn for his native blood. It must not be thought that such things were personal peculiarities of Shoghi Effendi or matters of policy. Far, far from it. It was the reflection of the very essence of the teachings that each division of the human race is endowed with gifts of its own, needed to make the new world order of Baha'u'llah diversified, rich, and perfect.
Praise God, praise God, praise God. We desire to show favor to those who are brought low in the land and to make them spiritual leaders among men and to make them our heirs. So I invite you to smile with me as we look at the dark-skinned people of the world quickly. And we don't have a lot of time for this, but I want to delight like Shoghi Effendi delighted, knowing that the dark-skinned people of the world were rising up and creating new civilization. We know about Colombia. We know that the Rui Institute started in Colombia. What do those people look like? Are they the dark-skinned people of the world? This is where the temple, I don't know if it's there now or it will be. In this setting, Norte del Cauca in Colombia. These are the people of Norte del Cauca in Colombia. These are the people of Norte del Cauca in Colombia, the dark-skinned people of the world. Here's their temple. Kenya. Here are the people of Kenya. Here they are, the people of Kenya. Here are the people of Kenya, the dark-skinned people of the world rising up. Prior to the pandemic, people of all ages were regularly gathering on the grounds of the local Baha'i House of Worship in Matunda, Soy, Kenya, to pray together and offer assistance with various aspects of the site's upkeep. Bahar Sharif, India, we know about this. We've heard about this so much. Dark-skinned people of the world. Beautiful. This will be their temple. Praise God. Drawing on patterns found in the Bahá'í folk art of Bahar and the region's long architectural heritage, the temple's design features a repeating pattern of arches. Ah, one of my favorite, Lubumbashi. I love saying that, Lubumbashi, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Here are the people. These are the places and the spaces where the community building process is transforming entire populations. These are the leaders. These are the leaders. I hope this is making you smile, because I tell you what, I am so thrilled about this. I don't know what to do. I'm glad I got to live to see it. These are the people in the village that's named Peace. And here's a beautiful contribution they made to the war, to ending the war. At a conference in Kakinje Central, I'm saying this wrong, Kakinje Central Kasai, the Baha'is of the Democratic Republic of the Congo brought together some 60 village and tribal chiefs, many of whom were on opposing sides of armed conflict only a year ago, to explore paths toward a society characterized by principles such as harmony, justice, and prosperity. Here is their temple. Here's their temple. The house of worship will embody the vibrant devotional spirit that has been fostered over the decades by the country's Baha'is. Vanuatu, here are the people. Here they are, after the cyclone struck the northern island of Vanuatu. The degree of unity and collective action fostered, and this is the possibilities that exist as we engage with this community building process. It says the degree of unity and collective action fostered through the educational activities of the Baha'i community enabled many people to respond swiftly to begin rebuilding and replanting. Here are the people, the groundbreaking for their temple, the beautiful people, the dark-skinned people of the world, the beautiful people. The beautiful people. And here's their temple. Papua New Guinea. We've heard about Papua New Guinea for some time. There they are, thrilled to take a picture of their temple. Here's the temple at night. That's what it will look like. A whole another place, Cambodia, groundbreaking for their temple. dark-skinned people. And here's their temple. And this is not a place that has a temple, but this place has, from my understanding, one of the largest or largest percentage-wise of Baha'is in this place. And where is this place? Recalling the promise of Baha'u'llah, should they attempt to conceal his light on the continent, he will assuredly rear his head in the midmost heart of the ocean, and raising his voice proclaim, I am the life giver of the world. We now witness its fulfillment in the vast area of the Pacific Ocean, an island after island mentioned by the master in the tablets of the divine plan. How great is the potential for the faith in localities blessed by these references. Here they are. So we got Papua New Guinea up here. We got Vanuatu here. And I know I'm not saying this right. How do you say this? Kiribati? It's Kiribati or something. It's not pronounced the way it looks.
Kiribati.
Thank you. And I put this picture in, even though it's not one of the places, because I love it. The beauty and the energy of these wonderful children. Again, friends, can you celebrate with me? Can you praise God that those who are brought low on the land are being lifted by this community building process all around the world and leading the way to a new world civilization? And it's happening in the United States on a lesser scale, but it's here. And at the end, I'll show you a video of some young people in Memphis, Tennessee. But we wanted to start with that. And could you just say, praise God? Praise God.
Praise God.
Praise God.
Praise
Praise
God.
God.
Praise God.
Praise God. Praise God. This is stunning. This is stunning. This is stunning truth. Okay. So we started, we were supposed to end. So that's, we're going to go back to the beginning now.
Back to the beginning. So let's talk about this compilation.
All right.
This beautiful compilation. Have you all seen this beautiful book? Isn't that not the most gorgeous cover? That blue just really lights me up. Love that. So here's the first question I want to ask you about the acknowledgements. Because
yes.
we worked on this, that section of the acknowledgements seemed like it was very important.
Yeah, and I want to spend a minute on this, but I think it's important as we think about this in Baha'i communities. You know, Sherilyn acknowledged the people that had made contributions even to this session. Acknowledgements is significant. It's particularly significant among people of color who have not been acknowledged for so long, have been slighted for so long. And so, and even in thinking about the acknowledgements, thinking about our Baha'i communities, how we make sure that people are being acknowledged. Of course, I want to acknowledge my precious wife, who has hung in there with me for 47 years, and our daughter. Of course, I want to acknowledge her, and I dedicated the first compilation to our youngest daughter who passed away in 1997. And of course, acknowledging her and you, Phyllis, who worked so diligently on this compilation. But what was very important to me also was that the indigenous people who helped me with this compilation were front and center. People of African descent that helped me with this compilation were front and center. And particularly, again, just in my view, I wanted to ensure that there was comments about African-American women and their history of sacrifice for this country. So that's really the significance of the acknowledgements. My heart is full even with those acknowledgements, to feel the importance of that. It says, when you acknowledge people, it's saying you matter, I see you. You matter, I see you. So.
Thank you for that. So you mentioned how you dedicated the first version of Toward Oneness to your daughter, Talia. And so my question here is, thinking about that first version, I mean, for me, that first version was like my procedural manual. You know, when my husband Gene and I were traveling around the country, that Toward Oneness, it's so beat up, our copies. we always had them under our arm everywhere we went because we were talking about race to the Baha'i community. And that was what we had to turn to. And it had all these wonderful question and answer format. It was so helpful. So what is it that made you decide to do an update?
Craziness.
I can go with that.
No. Palabra Publications called one day and said, did I want to do an update? And I thought about it. I prayed about it. I said, the House of Justice has just put out compilations. And, I don't know that we need another compilation. But then I talked to some people and they said that this question and answer format was helpful to understanding some of the things. And so I thought, well, if it's helpful in understanding what the House of Justice is asking us to do at this time, at this critical time in our history, then yeah, I'll spend the time at least doing my best to put together a compilation that has those questions, different questions, but questions that seem to be being asked by a number of people. So that's primarily why I did it.
And speaking of questions that are being asked, one of the questions that's being asked a lot is, how do we do what it is we're supposed to do? There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of frustration. I think I've heard you talk about that frustration, and it seems like you wrote a letter to the Universal House of Justice expressing that frustration.
Yes, indeed I
Can you tell us a little
did.
bit about that?
Okay, so in the compilation, it says this: the plans of the House of Justice have taken us on a journey of learning how to apply the revelation of Baha'u'llah within the context of a community building process driven by the Training Institute. Giving expression to the principle of the oneness of humankind, including the elimination of racial prejudice, has always been implicit in the methods and approaches and activities of these plans. However, and some of you will remember this back in 1996, however, in the beginning stages, there did not appear to be a focus directly on race. And so some of you might remember this, but in the early days of the community building process, the Institute process, it was as if race disappeared.
Mhm.
A lot of us who were out there in workshops, doing training, doing discussions about race, including you and Jean and many other people, it was like, it just disappeared. And no comments on it for a long time. And race was still an issue. It was everywhere in the broader community. It was everywhere in the Baha'i community. And yet there was so very little talk about it, except for these folks that were courageous enough to still try to do these workshops and discussions. And so it got to the point, and it was a level of frustration. And so I did write the House of Justice in 2009. And, writing the House of Justice is not an easy task. It's not something that I took lightly, but I spent a lot of time. I feel bad for them because it was about an 8 or 9 or 10 page letter. I don't remember now, but yeah, I wrote the House of Justice, really asking to be guided, to understand, what it is that we are supposed to do. So yeah, there was a level of frustration. And, I could say this too, when you write the House of Justice and they respond, you feel a particular obligation to pay attention, right? I mean, this is ahead of the faith. So I get the letter back about 1.5 years later. And I'm reading it and I'm touched by it, but I'm not fully getting it. I'm not fully grasping what they're asking us to do. And so many other people weren't fully grasping what they were asking us to do. What does it mean to address race within the Institute process, within the community building process? We were still learning what the Institute process was. We hardly knew that. And now we're being told to address race.
And we couldn't say the word systematization.
We couldn't say that word.
We couldn't even say it,
Right.
Systema.
But I want to just read this, Phyllis, because you and I have talked about this. But at the end of that letter, there was a particular particular statement the House of Justice made that really drove me as one human being to say, I got to figure this out. I got to understand what they're saying. And I'm asking everybody on this call to feel this passage with your heart as I read it. And as Angela said, with your heart and with your soul. This is what they wrote at the end of the letter. It is the ardent hope of the Universal House of Justice that the believers will appreciate the potentialities that exist within the current pattern of their organic activities for the realization of Baha'u'llah's highest aims for humanity. and that they will seize their chance, and that they will seize their chance and commit their time, their resources, their energies, indeed, their very lives to these critical efforts for the betterment of the world. The ardent hope of the House of Justice is that they will seize their chance and commit their time, their resources, their energies, indeed their very lives to these critical efforts for the betterment of the world. I mean, you can't read that without feeling some obligation to understand why is it they're saying this, and think of where we are today in the world and in the country, and what they said about addressing race back then within this context. Seize the chance, they said. And so just, yeah, I think I felt an obligation to do my best to understand it. And so one of the understandings that I wanted to offer is this, and I think this maybe fits some of us out there. And this is a reflective understanding. I read that letter. I was at a national convention. You know, the letter came probably about a week and a half before that national convention. It came, and I read it. I remember talking to Ken Bowers, and he said, well, you know, we've already got the packets ready, but we'll put it in the packet. And so we put it in the packet at the national convention. Race came up at the national convention. It was in the packet. The guidance was there. Nobody referred to it at all, right? Maybe they read it, but they didn't refer to it, right? I think a lot of people didn't understand what it was saying, even though we knew it was right. And so the understanding I came to, and I've been doing race stuff for a long time, Phyllis, you have for a long time, was slowly, as I began to understand what the House of Justice was asking, I realized that I was trying to shape what the House of Justice was saying to how I had already been addressing race. I was trying to shape it into my box.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's saying in relationship to what I'm doing, right?
Yes, yes.
Around, right? I need to think about what they're saying and shape what I'm doing within the context of what they're saying. And that seems very simplistic in some ways, but how subtle when you've been doing something a certain way for so long, you start to think, okay, I'm not getting this. I'm not, well, because I was thinking inside my box. I wasn't thinking inside their box. Slowly,
and our
slowly.
boxes are so limited, you know? I
Yeah,
mean, how
they are
can we
limited.
possibly have the vision that the House of Justice has? But I think that's really kind of human nature, isn't it? You know, we look at is that like an example of confirmation bias or something? We want the information we take in to fit
Right.
what we feel is reality. And we spent so much time and energy creating these programs that we did around race, you know, and then when it didn't fit, we were just dumbfounded.
Yeah. And, you know, and I'm saying this to all of us for reflection, it's not an accusation to myself. It's not an accusation to anybody out there, but I think just really paying attention to, as we think about addressing race, are we doing it within the context the House of Justice is asking us to do it, within the framework that they're asking us to do it, within the system that they're asking us to do it, regardless of how we've done it in the past. This applies to Blacks, whites, Persians, everyone.
Everybody. Yeah.
And you know what I came to realize, and this is in the compilation on page 1. Again, these are very simple concepts, but for me, worth reminding myself what the House of Justice is charged with doing. They're charged with applying the teachings. So what has been said, what Shoghi Effendi said about race, they're charged with applying the Baha'i teachings to the requirements of an ever-evolving civilization. And so even in that letter, they say that yes, what Shoghi Effendi said 70 years ago is as relevant today as it was then. But then they said that what would be required is that our approaches now be adapted. So what was said was true. How we apply addressing it is what had to change. And they said it this way: the Friends must effectively assess the forces at work in their society, beginning in their neighborhoods and clusters, contribute their share to the process of learning and systematization. which as their numbers and knowledge and influence grow, will transform their lives, families, and communities. And then they go on to make this statement: only if the efforts to eradicate the bane of prejudice are coherent with the full range of the community building affairs, only if they arise naturally within the systematic pattern of expansion, community building, and involvement with society, will the American believers expand their capacity year after year, decade after decade, to make their mark on their community and society, and contribute to the high aim set for the Baha'is by Abdu'l-Baha to eliminate racial prejudice from the face of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And what Shoghi Effendi said never changed. How we address what Shoghi Effendi said certainly has changed and has to be adapted. And I think that's what we're learning. I think the key words is we're all engaged in this work of race. I think some key words are in there. Is it coherent? Is what we're doing coherent? Is it coherent with the framework for action? Is it systematic? And this is something we can only answer for ourselves. We question ourselves in what we're doing. We don't accuse other people of not doing it this way or not doing it that way. We reflect ourselves because it's part of the plan. What are we doing? Is this systematic? Is it coherent within the framework of the plan? We may not always know, but at least we're asking ourselves the questions. And this is part of—
Say something about that in particular.
Yeah, it's important. I know there's something you want to say about that, so please.
I've heard that quote misstated so many times. I've heard people draw on that particular phrase from the letter and say, well, we're only supposed to address race. These are white people, I mean, just by the way, that say this. We're only supposed to address race if it arises naturally. And then they create some definition of what naturally means. And it doesn't say that. The quote does not say we address race only if it arises naturally. That's not what it says. What it says, it's an if-then statement, right? Only if our efforts to eradicate prejudice are coherent with the full range of the community affairs, number one, only if that, and only if our efforts arise naturally, not if race arises naturally, if our efforts arise naturally within the systematic pattern of expansion, community building, and involvement with society. If those two conditions are met, then we will expand our capacity. And then what does it say? Year after year and decade after decade. We're not talking about, the course of 1 or 2 months here. Decade after decade, we expand our capacity to make our mark. And we can't do that if we're not proceeding in a systematic way that involves cycles of reflection, cycles of learning, cycles of experimenting, trying new things and seeing how they work, and then building on our successes. So that the whole systematic nature of the Institute process is what allows us to expand our capacity decade after decade, if we do it by meeting those two conditions.
Phyllis, that's important on so many levels. And I want to say this, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but in the letter that they wrote back, and I almost laugh sometimes now when I read it now, because it seems a little bit funny, but what they said is that the Baha'i community, and this is really responding to the question I asked, because I asked them, I said, look, the Baha'i community addresses race. I said, address it in fits and starts. I said, there might be some incident that happens, and then there's some heartfelt appeal, and then there's Baha'i communities start to address race, and then some people are on the sidelines, some people get involved, the tension wanes, they move on to something else until the next heartfelt crisis comes. We start to address it, the tension wanes, some people are on the sidelines. I said, this is the way it's gone from in the Baha'i community, in these fits and starts. And the House of Justice acknowledged that. They said, yes, the Baha'i community has addressed race in fits and starts. It's addressed it in the exact way that was said. And they said to continue on that path will only produce unsatisfactory results, right? And then they went on to say, and this is what made me laugh, they said, well, actually then entire community, the way the entire community has operated has been in fits and starts. So, and they said that now they put us on a new course of action with the 1996 4-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important, and the thing about the fits and starts for people of African descent that are out here and indigenous people, that kind of a process of addressing race was demoralizing, it was debilitating, because in the Baha'i community, you're out there and you're hoping your brothers and sisters are going to work with you to address race, and you're out there working at it. You get excited at this time because there's a heartfelt appeal and some people get on board, and then a few months later it's gone. And then your energy, the psychology of your energy, emotions just are devastated. And then you pick yourself back up the next time. Same thing happens. And this went on for years. Right?
How can you keep picking yourself back up?
Well, some people didn't. And that's the challenge. Some people didn't. And now the House of Justice says, no more. We're going to address race, and we're going to address it systematically within a system. It's operationalized within the community building process. It's addressed in the system. So ultimately, as we continue to focus on the system, we will not be able to get away from addressing race. It's built into the system, and as we make it the watchword in everything we do in that system, we won't be able to avoid it. And we may do it, it'll be more challenging in some communities than in other communities. We know that. It's not like just because they say it, it's going to happen. But praise God, we're building a system to eliminate racism. And they tell us it's all within this framework of expansion and consolidation, discourse and social action. This is the framework. Well, that's the framework for everything we're doing.
Yeah.
And they say we have to address it in that entire framework.
And how can we hope to create a model that replaces racism, right? Which is systematic in its very nature. You know, everything about racism is systematic. Everything about racism is organized and adaptable, and you know, it exists when there's no racists in the room, right? And so here we are creating a system to replace that. We can't do that in fits and starts. You know, what we're doing has to be not just equally, but more systematic, more adaptable, more self-sustaining. You know.
So one other thing I want to say about this in terms of, you know, paying attention to the way the House of Justice is asking us to do this. And I'll just use this as an example.
Okay.
So in one of their letters, they talked about, because, you know, Baha'is wrote to them and they asked them, you know, we have prejudice in our communities. Don't we need to address that first? And this is an example of what I mean. I've always said, look, we got a lot of messiness in our community. We have to address that before we move forward, right?
Right, so we don't do any more damage.
So I'm locked into that thinking. And I'm giving you an example of trying to shape the way I think, what the House of Justice said versus the other way around. Here's what they said: in the same light, there is no program or special intervention that, if undertaken by the Baha'i community, will free it from the challenge of racial prejudice as a first step, before it can attempt to carry out successful efforts. They didn't say efforts, they said before it can attempt to carry out successful efforts for the progress of the faith. Rather, the capabilities of the believers to address the issues of racism afflicting themselves, their families, their communities, and the wider society will be cultivated hand in hand with the other capabilities needed to advance the process of entry by troops, as they learn to systematically pursue their efforts of community building, social action, and involvement in the discourses of society. These kind of things challenge me.
Very challenging.
You know, and then, but again, as we engage in the process, we see where that can become systematic. We see where it can happen hand in hand. And I'll give you an example. In Washington, D.C., there's a number of communities, a number of Baha'is working in African-American communities in and around Washington, D.C. They weren't all Black people working in these communities. There are white people, Persians, et cetera, working in these communities. This is happening not just in DC, but in other areas of around DC, Baltimore and some other places. And so the auxiliary board members said, okay, we're working in these communities. Are we being sensitive to the way that we need? Are we being sensitive enough to the cultures of these communities the way we need to be? So they called folks together And there was an African-American woman who had been doing a lot of work in these communities. She was from these communities. She was familiar with the community building process. And given what book 6 says, which I love, what it says about working in these communities, there's a couple pieces of the language I'd like to share. They talked about the importance that would work in African-American communities of purity of heart. This is all in book 6, of avoiding hypocrisy, of confusing kindness with paternalism. Kindness with paternalism. And then in that same book, they say cultures are not things of museums. They're not things of museums to be preserved and visited by curious observers. These are the kinds of things that said in book 6 about thinking about how we engage in these communities. Well, people had done some of their homework before they went in these communities. It wasn't like they were doing awful things, but it felt like we needed some kind of a workshop, some kind of a training to ensure that we are moving forward in a way that was respectful and was powering to these populations. And so this person came and did this workshop. They addressed a number of these issues, and it helped the community building process advance. So coherence to that workshop. It wasn't just a random thing. Let's do it in the conscious. I'm not saying that's the only way that we can be coherent, but then I started to understand, okay, this is what maybe some of my workshops can look like. They can be involved in this pattern of system. And maybe
it takes us out of this dichotomous thinking,
right.
That the House of Justice expressed so clearly, that it's either we can fall into this way of thinking that either we do a program for the elimination of racial prejudice or we do the institute process. And this dichotomous thinking has paralyzed so many Baha'i communities, so many places where people, they've just kind of come to a screeching stop because there's not a way that within their vision, what they're able to envision, to bring this education about race. And in particular, I'm looking at how white Baha'is, educating themselves about our unconscious inherent sense of superiority and the process that's required to do that kind of a deep dive. We have to do that first before we do anything else. And yet that's not what the House of Justice is saying.
Yeah.
And so to rise above that dichotomous thinking, which is challenging, and it puts us in situations that are incredibly challenging, right?
Yeah.
To figure out how to be doing those things in a way where they are integrated with each other so that it's sustainable.
Yeah. And Phyllis, you bring up another good point. And this is sensitive stuff, right? Because I don't want people going in these African-American communities with messed up attitudes. Right? And so we know that the community building process calls upon us to engage with people with a posture of humility, which is very opposite of a sense of superiority. Learning mode, capacity building, empowerment, service. These are the attitudes that we are to have, that are cultivated within the institute process that can be empowering attitudes. We know that. And we know people can try to be sensitive. And so this kind of balance that we're trying to strike of saying, okay, we need to know something, but we don't need to know everything, because we know that until you engage with people that are of other races, you can say, I'm not prejudiced. You can say that I get it, but until you bump up against it, it hits you in the face because you engage and you see yourself doing something.
Yep.
And you can learn quickly. And I've seen in Washington, D.C. and some other places where people who had sensitivities have gone to these communities and they came back and they said, okay, boy, did I run up against my patronizing attitudes. I didn't think I had it, but now and I say, praise God. Now you can address it. Now you won't say you don't have it because you've seen it, but you wouldn't have seen it unless you engage. And so there's this balance that has to happen. That's why they have to happen hand in hand, right? But if we're going through the institute process and we're training ourselves through that process to be humble, to be servants, to exhibit these particular qualities, we'll bring something with it. I can tell you a story about somebody in this community and who came to, and I'm going to be very vague so as not to give away any who this was, but it was an African American who came to some training. And she was one of the only African Americans in the training process, right? And she was enjoying it. And there was a spirit, there was a camaraderie, there was a connection that she was making. She was feeling, this is the person who's not a Baha'i, she's feeling the word of God, she's feeling that connection and really liking it. But at the same time, she's the only African-American person in that space. She's feeling that spirit, feeling that energy, feeling all that stuff, even fellowship, but I can't be myself fully.
Yeah.
She goes back home to her community, which is an all African-American community, right? And once she gets back to that community, she says to herself, you know what? This stuff, the way they're doing it, it's not going to work in my community.
Yeah.
And I need to tell them that, you know? So she comes back, you know, in this environment, she brings it up. She said, look, I got to tell you some stuff. So she tells them that this is not going to work in their community. They need to do it differently. People who are doing the training said, well, you know, tell us what you think we need to do so we can change it. They also helped her to go to an environment that was more comfortable for her within an all African-American neighborhood. She came back from that neighborhood juiced and brought that information to the process. And the bottom line is that she was connected through this training institute process. The people doing it were not perfect. They were open to hearing what she had to say, said what she had to say. They heard what she had to say. Growth took place. And that's kind of how it needs to happen. Yeah. People bumped up against each other in this process, but they listened and they heard. And ultimately, it's a wonderful story. This person went back to her home. She continued going. She actually enrolled in that space, okay? And went back to her community, got involved. What's in book 1, book 2, book 4, book 5, book 7, about 5 books, tutored and collaborated or accompanied by a Persian, Iranian woman community, you know. And I've been in touch with this African-American woman constantly. None of it's perfect. She still has challenges. There's still things that she feels like need to be improved, but she's in the game now, right? And she's helping to improve it. And now, praise God, she even wants to go home front pioneering this year, right? So it's about within that system, because there was a participatory process, there was a word of God that was focused, there was some fellowship, some intimacy, these study circles that helped it, and it brought it all together. She participated in devotional gatherings also that helped buoy her spirit. But the point is, everybody learned in that process. There's many stories like that of people doing devotional gatherings and praying with the word of God and bringing people together in those devotional spaces where things can be addressed. That's part of the community building process, right? And then addressing issues of race within the context of those spaces, right? White people facilitating, Persian people, Black people facilitating. And again, this is very delicate stuff. I'm not saying it's like, none of this is magic. The things that I've seen work, none of it's sweetness and light. None of it's like a one-time thing. They go to one study circle, now everything's okay.
Right, yeah.
This back and forth, because we're building this oneness as we learn how to apply. So
Yeah, I'm thinking about we had a women's race devotional, went on for about 2 years, and 3 of the women were Black and 3 of us were white. We got together regularly and had very, very intense conversations. And this was supposed to be a devotional gathering. And one of the women was agnostic, and 3 of us were Baha'is, 3 were not Baha'is. And one of the women who was agnostic was not really comfortable with prayer, so she sang. We did a lot of singing. But what happened is that we started building trust. And as the trust built, the 3 African-American women, the Baha'is and the one who's not a Baha'i, spent more time talking about how racism impacted their lives. And pretty soon, when we got together, the entire time we were together was spent with these 3 Black women talking about how racism was impacting them and impacting their lives. And at one point, I remember thinking, you know, this is supposed to be a devotional gathering. I think we should spend more time praying, you know, and not just talking the whole time. And also, it's very one-sided. I mean, it's only these Black women talking, and the white women aren't getting any chance to speak at all. And so I was getting myself wound up to make a proposal, you know, that we spend more time praying and we do something where we could balance who spoke more equitably. And I don't know, it was like a phrase from one of these letters just popped into my mind, a humble posture of learning. And I thought, okay, what I'm proposing here in my mind is not very humble, and it's also not about learning.
Yeah.
So I just let it go.
Yeah.
Even though I was still kind of wound up, About 2 weeks later, this one Black woman who's agnostic, she said, "This space is saving my life.
Yeah.
If it were not for this space, if I could not come here regularly and talk and say everything I need to say and have you white women sit there and listen to me," she said, "if I didn't have that, I don't know how I would get through my days."
Yeah, and it's important that these spaces are prayerful so that our spirits can embrace these things, right? And that's I think one of the beauties of these devotional gatherings. Last story, Phyllis, and I think we should open up and hear if anybody else has any stories. I know there's a few other things we want to say, but
I'm looking
I don't want to take all the time.
Yeah.
When we talk about this whole, the community building process, the Institute process, really operationalizes the principle of the oneness of humankind. It helps us, all these courses that we take help us to understand our identity, whether we're Black, white, whoever we are. It helps us get to the soul part of our identity. And then the capacity part that comes out once our soul is connected and we want to serve, and we create space for people to figure out how they want to serve, but it's about really connecting to, our identity. Who are we as human beings, and how do we express that with a consciousness of oneness? And so in a junior youth group, and I don't know this whole story, there was a junior youth group in at a middle school, I believe. And I think they were doing work with a African-American group and a Hispanic Latino group. Now, they were not, in the school, they didn't mix, right? They didn't come together. And so the way I understand the story is, and again, I know this wasn't all sweetness and light either. So the way I understand the story is that as they engaged separately with these two groups, as they started to get a better sense of who they were, what their purpose was, they brought up the idea of coming together with you, right? And again, this is all a part of the process, and the empowerment, the understanding of who you are, causes you to want to do things. I know there's many stories like that, but I think this is part of what the system looks like, that it's part built in the system. Now, I don't want anybody to walk away from this session at all to think that they don't need to sensitize themselves when they engage with people of African descent or people of color. I'm just trying to make the point that part of that sensitizing will be the engagement itself. And then the willingness to reflect in that humble posture of your attitudes, your behaviors, your thought processes, et cetera.
Yeah, that part is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. So there's a couple of points we want to make at the end, but one of the things we wanted to ask, and we haven't gone into all the details of the community building process because we just felt like that would be like a little bit too tedious. We know that that the framework the House of Justice has asked us to operate in is in the framework of expansion and consolidation, public discourse, and social actions. That's the broad framework that we're engaging in as we address issues of race. And so we were wondering if, one or two people, maybe three, depending on what Sherilyn says, have any stories of how they've seen their work in the community building process help us to address issues of racial prejudice. And again, I want to say that it's not like a one-time thing, that it may be an activity that we shared just now, helped to address race. But again, it wasn't just one activity, it's a series of activities, and it's never done. It's just there's an environment that can continue to grow. So when we're asking for stories, we're just asking if anybody has something to share of an experience where they felt the community building process has helped them address issues of elimination of racial prejudice.
All right, thank you. Here's how we'd like to do this. First, I want to make just one or two announcements about the rest of the program this evening. Formally, we technically end around 9:30 because we say we're 2 hours. Now, Todd and Phyllis are going to be able to be here with us until 10 p.m. And as we always do, we'll also be around till about 10:30 for further discussion for those who'd like to continue and stay on. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that. And if you do have to leave early, this is being recorded. If you're on our email list, you'll get that notification. And if you'd like to be on the list, please just put your email address in the chat. You can direct it to me privately or to everyone. It's up to you, and we'll get you on there. So how we'd like to proceed is if you have something that you'd like to share addressing Todd and Phyllis's question, please put your name in the chat. Nason is going to open the chat back up. Also, if you'd like to share any general comments or remarks about the presentation, that's fine. Please do that. I also ask you to consider possibly sharing them in email. Why? Because chat can get very crowded, and it can be very difficult to find people who simply want to speak or share a comment. Any information you put in the chat, of course, other than your email address, personal things like that, I clean up and I send that to our presenters. So they will get to see your comments, even if we're not able to read them out today during the program. Okay, so in the chat, let's see, who do we have? Oh gosh, I got a bunch of emails. That's wonderful. Do we have anyone that's ready to present? And if you'd like to present, please tell me that in the email, or I'm sorry, in the chat. Okay. Okay, here we go. Liz Ellis. Liz, would you please come off mute? And Todd and Phyllis, how long we go with this portion is entirely up to you. So you just let me know when to stop calling on people.
Hi. One experience I was just going to mention, sort of an organic way that in a study circle, I can't remember, I think I was tutoring book 6 with some young, some African-American youth. And it was, part of it was about the challenges of the society that we live in and some of the issues of how young people have to make decisions to, choose the best things to do. And we started talking about race, or I brought it up, and then both the young men, one young man said, well, racism's never going to end. And I said, well, because this young man's a Baha'i. And I said, well, the teachings of Baha'u'llah are, that's what we're doing. That's why we're here, is because, Baha'u'llah has given us this method, his teachings, to help us create unity. And we talked a little bit more about it. And then the young man that was, there was just 2 young people there. He said, Miss Liz, I've never had a white person talk to me about race. Never.
It's true.
Never had a white person bring up race. Or I've never talked to anybody about race that was white. So that's one example of something that's just very simple. It's not like, you have to raise a big banner and start. It's just a simple human conversation. And then there was another situation with some of the junior youth in our junior youth group. Adelia, my daughter, had done a little training for them on the people of African descent being the pupil of the eye, and all the junior youth, and she talked about, what do you think that means? And they talked about the eye and vision and things like that. And then they just started talking about all the problems they had at school with being treated differently than the white kids were, or feeling that way. And so we really talked about, I listened, I brought up things if I felt it was something was relevant. But in the process, we realized that this one young girl had a really severe challenge from this teacher. So we went to her mother about it. And it was right before Todd and some friends had come down there. down here. And then there's just one other thing, and I'm going to stop. But unless you really get to know people as human beings, you know, being a Baha'i isn't about always teaching people. I mean, it's like we can't stay in this framework of somehow thinking we're Baha'is and these guys have to know what I know. And so we kind of create this environment that's based on what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And instead just talk with each other and listen to each other. And I mean, these kids had just all kinds of things happening in their lives that they really needed to talk about. And so I think that the organic part of dealing with race is to be human, you know, to treat people like they're human beings, and to see ourselves and each other that way, and not kind of hold ourselves separate from others, like somehow we've got to be perfect. And I don't know, I'm going on a little bit, but I do think that we've really got to get it together, and that you know, I am white, and I think there's a lot of challenges for American Baha'is that are white to realize that the faith is not what we think it is, and that we don't have to be in charge of everything. We don't, you know, the faith is not going to fall apart if I don't do everything, if I'm not making sure. I mean, we've got to learn to let go of our own understanding of what the faith is, and just bring people in, just let people know. Because until we have more people in the faith, we're, you know, that's one of the things that the National Spiritual Assembly mentions, that we've got to get more people in the faith, that's one of the ways to end racism, is to bring more African Americans, and then let people be who they are, and learn the writings, and the writings is what's our guide, not who's important and having some special way of doing things.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Liz.
Todd, Phyllis, any reply? Or we have two more individuals that have something they'd like to share, and we have two folks that sort of have question, comments, and things they're struggling with.
Yeah, everything Liz said, obviously, I agree with. I think, again, I think what the transformative nature of this community building process, we're trying to build a culture of change. We're trying to build a culture of service. We're trying to build a culture of humility. And there's got to be a system to do that. It can't be left to individuals. And people don't just get over their prejudices overnight. So, you know, the way it feels like when they talk, when, you know, some people I know don't like the example of India, which we are told about, and how that helped to change the caste system, which is similar to the racial system. But my guess is that over time, as people engaged in the study circles, as they looked more deeply at their identity, what it meant to be human, all those kinds of things, what it meant to serve other people, what it meant to be participatory in the process, what it meant to have genuine relationships, because that's all part of the community building process. The more they were in those environments, those study circles, those kinds of dynamics, the more you start to shift your thinking, and then you start to look at your behaviors, and then you're more willing to look at your behaviors because you're being touched by the word of God, and you're being touched by these practices over time. And then at some point you start to soften up a little bit, hopefully, and are open to changing some of the things you want to do. So I think everything Liz said, I agree with. I think the change will come as people engage more fully in the process, as the House of Justice is asking us to do it. And like I mentioned earlier, in book 6, it addresses a lot of those challenges that she mentioned, that everybody we'll have to go through eventually and start to learn. What does it mean to be culturally sensitive? What does it mean to be a hypocrite when you're in these communities? What does it mean to be paternalistic when you're in these communities? So yeah.
Okay, Adria and Nancy would like to, or I'm sorry, Adrienne and Nancy would like to share their activity called Pizza and Social Justice.
Ah,
Hello, my Illinois peeps.
We can't hear you if you're speaking. You're off mute, but we can't hear you.
Oh, I think you're frozen.
a minute here.
Yeah, you're frozen now, folks. I don't know if you can hear us. Why don't we come back to you? You might need to go out and come back in. Yeah, okay. So Ronaldo, Raheem. Ronaldo?
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you for this presentation. I want to share what's going on here in the greater Cincinnati area. The Cincinnati LSA, when the letters came out from the Universal House of Justice and the National Spiritual Assembly about race unity and asked us to study them, we did it on the Zoom format. And I think we met for about three weeks in a row. And then the Westchester community decided to continue with this discussion on race. So every Monday since then, the Westchester community and the greater Cincinnati community, we've been meeting. I think we started out with maybe 6 or 7 people, and now we have about 17 people, and they rotate in and out. But we discuss and read some of the materials. For example, we studied the Frederick Douglass 4th of July letter. And the lady, and we have several members of our group that's on in this presentation right now today. Dr. Kendi, his presentation, his book. So we listened to a video of him. So it's a discussion group. It's diverse, and it's making progress. And we feel like we are building a community, and it's not all Baha'is. And actually, our last meeting, we had a Zoom potluck and celebrating actually Gwendolyn Etta Lewis' birthday.
Oh, praise God.
Yes. So it's community building, and we're looking forward to when we can get together in person. But it's a wonderful activity though. That's it's bringing the community together.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Any comments from our presenters?
Phyllis, I don't want to do all the talking. I had a thought, but you go ahead, please.
I know I would much rather hear your thought than whatever I was going to say. Please proceed.
Well, I just think one of the things that's in the compilation when we talk about the role of individuals, institutions, and communities, sometimes we think that it's just the spiritual knowledge that we need. And we can poo-poo secular knowledge. Well, we're Baha'is and we can just read. What my understanding of the writings is we need both secular and spiritual knowledge that go together. So kinds of things that was just mentioned that we learned from these various books, these various materials, and the spiritual alongside are things that can help us engage and connect. And so I think there shouldn't be a dichotomy between, oh, let's just read the writings and not read these other materials, which help us to understand more effectively how to apply the writings and what they mean. So I just wanted to say praise God to that and the effort that's being made.
I'm just thinking about a community I know where some of the white Baha'is did a study of the book White Fragility.
Right.
And there was a very specific reason. One of their Black Baha'i sisters had expressed some pain and concern, and it was discounted. And people were kind of trying to make excuses for it. And so then they saw her reaction to that, and they saw her pain, and got together and did a study of white fragility. And that's a marvelous book, for what it's supposed to do. But when you take that book and frame it in Shoghi Effendi's words, about a subconscious inherent sense of superiority, all of a sudden the whole concept of white fragility takes on a whole different meaning, and you have a framework within which to understand it that you wouldn't have otherwise without the writings, of the faith. So it was really amazing to see the difference, the shift in the community that happened after that study took place, and the introspection among the white Baha'is, and it shifted the whole environment of the entire community.
We also studied that compilation too. Sorry.
Mhm.
That's kind of right. Okay.
I was going to say we have 5 minutes. Sorry, Sherlyn, I didn't mean to catch up. So if we have 5 minutes before 9:30. We can stay longer, but I don't know. We had like two points we wanted to make sure we got before people go home, or
Right.
everybody's home, before people turn off their computer. So do we want to do those and then continue with the comments, or what do you think about that, Todd?
I'm torn because
that would be my suggestion. And when you've done your 2 points, I have actually just 2 brief announcements to make, and then we'll come back and continue. There are a couple of, folks have some questions, some experiences they have questions about, or they'd like to hear from others, including yourselves, about, and we can go from there as you'd like to.
Yeah, I'd really love
here
to
until 10. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'd love to hear more of other people's examples too. But,
okay. So go back to you guys now.
But I want to say one of the reasons, and I know this may go over, and I know people have to go. I just think, we're at a time in the world where we can't play. This is not playtime. This is real time. And these issues and understanding what the House of Justice is asking us to do, and sharing these thoughts with each other. What we're sharing is just our thoughts, what our understanding is. But really locking down on this is so important. And a lot of times you put things out there and just hope people will think and process it through their best understanding. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to get across in this, in Washington, D.C., we've had about 10 African Americans enroll in a little over a year. Faith. And praise God, and I think almost all of them came in through the Institute process, and they are engaged in, and I'm not promoting the Institute process like this rigid thing. I'm saying that it's an empowerment process that allows people to find their place in building a new world order and building the kingdom of God. It's a tool that helps people learn how to build the kingdom of God, and to see a number of African Americans coming in through that tool, through that vehicle, finding their place and then engaging is powerful. And so, and what Liz said, we need more African Americans in this faith and Indigenous people. And if we're going to get more African Americans in this faith and Indigenous people, which I think is vital to the entire development of the Baha'i community, then it's got to be everybody's job. Not Black people have to teach African Americans. Everybody's got to teach African Americans, because all the things we know, until we get more African Americans and Indigenous people, the transformation of the community is simply not going to happen. And we're running out of time. So everybody's got to be in the game. Everybody's got to be in the game. And so part of what were you going to say something, Phyllis?
Just that, I ask people sometimes, so when you think of entry by troops, when you close your eyes and you envision entry by troops, who are they? Who are those troops? What color are their faces? And frequently, if I'm talking to a white group, there's a moment of, yeah. So what does it look like? What do we envision? If there are large numbers of African American folks who come into this faith, what will it be like when we have many Baha'i communities where the majority of Baha'is are African American? How is that going to change what the American Baha'i community can do? It's really, in my understanding, the only way we're going to be able to achieve our destiny. So that's all.
And in that spirit, the encouragement that Phyllis and I are giving is that people throw themselves into understanding what the House of Justice is asking us in terms of how to address race, that we throw ourselves into it fully. And in that spirit, just want to be clear that we know that some of the ways that the community building process has been presented has not always been conducive to attracting people of African descent, indigenous people. We know that's true. And so when we talk about throwing ourselves into it, we're not saying because the way it is right. It's because if we don't throw ourselves into it, we can't make the corrections that are necessary to make it accessible to everyone.
That's right.
So here is what, and to know that the House of Justice has told us that every circumstance is different and we don't have to copy the way other people do it. They said the very fact that each set of circumstances presents its own challenge.
Sort of.
Yeah. There's some background. There's some background.
Yeah, I think you're good now.
Okay, the very fact that each set of circumstances presents its own challenges is enabling every community not simply to benefit from what is being learned in the rest of the Baha'i world, but also to add to that body of knowledge. Awareness of this reality frees one from the fruitless search for a rigid formula for action, while still allowing the insights gleaned in diverse settings to inform the process of growth as it takes a particular shape in one's own surroundings. This entire approach is completely at odds with narrow conceptions of success and failure that breed freneticism or paralyzed volition. Detachment is needed. When effort is expended wholly for the sake of God, then all that occurs belongs to him, and every victory won in his name is an occasion to celebrate his praise. Again, the point being that the cultural realities that you may face with these community building activities may cause you to need to adapt, and in many cases will need to adapt because the cultural realities are different. And the House of Justice is saying that very thing, that each circumstance presents its own challenge. So as African Americans and indigenous people, remember that we are asked to add to the body of knowledge, not just take on the body of knowledge that we receive. I think this is an important element of freedom, at least in my mind and heart. I don't have to do it the way everybody else does it. In very simple language.
Yes.
Could you share with us as our final kind of formal presentation point, your thoughts that are at the end of the front matter of the book, if it feels like an appropriate time to do that, about the pupil of the eye?
Well, you know, the book is a compilation, which again is just a tool if it helps people understand what the House of Justice is asking us to do. But the compilation, I'll just read it. A final word, and this is at the end of the thoughts on the study of the compilation. A final word, the designation pupil of the eye, referring to those of African descent, sacred in my estimation, and must be fully embraced with the utmost humility and with absolute confidence in its truth. It must be embraced, fully embraced with the utmost humility and with absolute confidence in its truth, and also with full acceptance of the responsibility that goes with it. We have a particular role, and I'm talking about we Black people, in reaching our Black brothers and sisters, whose significantly expanded presence and wholehearted participation is vital to the qualitative and quantitative growth of the faith. Likewise, it is my hope that we will expand and extend our efforts to reach out and connect and collaborate with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, whose humanity has continually been denigrated and who also have spiritual gifts that are vital to the well-being and future of this planet. Finally, there is a special role that we who are the pupil of the eye have to play in building communities based on love, unity, and justice. This does not suggest that we are more obligated than others to address racism and prejudice, but the designation does convey a deep and profound responsibility, however each of us might internalize and interpret it. In that spirit of all that has been shared, I have chosen to begin this compilation after the message from the July 22nd message from the House of Justice with passages that center the significance of our role at this critical time in our nation's history. So I don't know if that's what you wanted me to share, Phyllis, but that's the end of it.
That was it. Thank you.
Okay, so a chance for Todd and Phyllis to get a quick sip of water, just have a couple of announcements to make, and then we'll go right back. First, friends, yes, this is recorded. Those of you that are on the email list will get the notice when the recording's posted on our YouTube channel. Any references that were made here throughout the discussion or in the chat will also be included in the email. Some of you have asked for the link to the compilation. That will also be included in the email as well. I need to tell you about the next 2 weeks very quickly. Next week, we have Dr. Angelita Reyes, and she's going to be speaking on the pandemic as portal, race, caste, and new approaches to constructive resilience. And I'll just share a brief synopsis of what that's going to be about. I think it's quite timely. Isn't this always timely? There's never a time when it isn't, actually. But in particular, she says, racism is a disease that devastates society. How are some Baha'i communities responding to this urgency of the racial pandemic? How do we not return to normality? The pandemic as a portal appropriates new kinds of reckonings and action. When various tropes from African American history and culture, or with various approaches, various tropes from African American history and culture, she applies the collective meaning of constructive resilience and resistance in the context of Baha'i institutional writings about racial oppression and the urgent need for establishing racial unity. So that is definitely another do not miss. You will also get an email with that information as well. It's also on our Facebook events page. February 13th, please mark your calendars. This is a very joyful occasion. It's called the Praise, Prayer, and Devotional Potlatch. All the family, all of the great lineages of this beautiful, beautiful human family are invited to a celebration of praise for each other, for this wonderful Lord that we all thank for all the wonderful things we have, and for the opportunity to be present at this time and to undertake this incredibly important work that's so vital, not just to this generation or the next, but to future generations for years and years and years to come. If you haven't heard about it, that's also on the event page. Please sign up before January 30th. Spaces are filling up quickly. And we'd like to have as many of you represented there to enjoy that. It's strictly devotional, poetry, singing, call and response, spoken word, storytelling. We've got our Indigenous brothers and sisters from Canada coming, some folks from Latin America coming. And I know everyone here, our African brothers and sisters and our white brothers and sisters, everyone is going to be engaged in this. So please come. It's a time of celebration as we enter a Yamiha, which is a very joyful and sharing time in February for Baha'is. So having said that, let me tell you what we have in the chat right now, and then we can decide how we'd like to proceed. We're going to call Adrian and Nancy back because they're back now, and I could hear Adrian, so I think he's good to go to share a story. And then Bradley from Peoria, Illinois, also has a story to share about an activity that they're doing there. In addition, we've had 2 questions, comments, statements that I think are, certainly worth sharing and considering. And I'm summarizing from Colette. She says, I often feel that I fall short in incorporating race in study circles. And she's looking for assistance, support, guidance, collaboration, and how to do that. You may want to reach out on her in the chat, or if Colette wants to, she can also share her email and ask folks to respond to her. Elaine has asked that we share stories of discomfort because we need to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's very true, Elaine. That's certainly very true. There are a lot of places I think you can get those stories, but I'm sure many of us here would be able to share those with you as well. And then finally, Van Gilmer has would like to address, I'm sorry, Julia just would like to speak about music with respect to race. And then Van would also like to speak on the challenges he finds in incorporating race in the programs of growth and what he believes is a unique way in which he's going about doing that. So that is what is on the table. There's been lots of feedback to you guys, but in the interest of time, I haven't been sharing those so we can stay with the meat here. So shall we proceed with Adrian and Nancy and Bradley, and then we'll see where folks are with the other issues. Okay, Adrian, are you guys there? There you are.
Yep, we're here. Can you hear us now?
Yes, wonderful.
Glory be.
Well,
Adrian says I have to talk first.
Okay.
It's been about 3 years now since we decided we needed to have people over to have pizza and talk about issues of race. And first we started doing that just monthly in our homes, or our own home. And then through a variety of events, I won't try to tell the story here, we ended up with a planning team of 8 to 10 people and regular meetings hosted for free at a local church, open to the community. And we have been meeting, well, now of course everything's on Zoom. So now we meet 3 times a month by Zoom. And of course, since we're on Zoom, we have people coming from all over the country, not just from our local area. And unfortunately, we can't share pizza with everybody anymore because we're on Zoom. But someday we hope we'll be able to get back to that. We, as I say, we meet the first Friday of every month and the first and third Tuesdays. We have a website, a phenomenal website, because we have a web guru here. And the website, if anybody wants to join, there's a calendar on the website that gives you the links on the first Friday and the first and third Tuesdays of every month. The website is pizzaandsocialjustice.org. Adrian will put it in the chat.
Great.
And we have found that the whole thing has grown so organically that we are now in the process of trying to become a 501c3 nonprofit.
Wow. Wow.
But we're always happy to have anybody else who wants to join the conversation chime in. We spend 15 minutes or so at the beginning of every meeting socializing.
we do a lot of socializing.
We do a lot of socializing, and then we spend 15 minutes or so doing introductions and announcements, as if we were still all sitting together in the cozy room at the church. And then we have a 15-ish minute video to use as a conversation starter. And then we go out into breakout rooms for a little while and come back and share our learnings. And then we usually try to end with something uplifting, like music from Playing for Change or somebody.
Right.
We spend a couple of hours 3 times a month, and we've had amazing results.
Good on you for the nonprofit. That is not for the weak, not for the faint of heart, a nonprofit.
No, well, and that's why there are 9 or 10 of us on the planning team, and we've hired an attorney to help walk us through
Okay,
this.
that's the way to do it. Yes. Go, guys, go.
Thanks, Phyllis.
And this started out originally from, we used to host, before COVID, we used to host Saturday night dinner every Saturday night. And the conversation around the table would always end up at some point speaking about race. And that's how we started doing the Friday night discussions about race. Since we kept talking about it so much, we figured, well, let's dedicate an evening to that subject. And that's where it grew from. Very organic. And we also designed our program the framework is very easy to replicate.
That's right. On the website, there's a whole DIY section. So if you want to
Nice.
come and try it out with us for a while and get the feel for it. And then the website has all sorts of materials, references, and resources.
We have about 270 videos to choose from already
Wow.
picked up and
Previewed.
or previewed,
Yeah.
checked out. And also just instructions on how to do it yourself. And we are also available to help anyone with their meetings if they want to start to do it themselves, host it themselves.
Thank you, guys.
That's a phenomenal resource. And that definitely will go in the email out to everyone, as long as you know, whatever you provide in the chat there for me to include in that, or email to me directly. I'll make sure that that gets out. And our list is growing. We've got almost 400 people on our email list right now. So you may
Charlene,
get a few calls.
you saved the chat. You'll give us all of the emails.
Yes,
The chat, right?
yes, I saved the chat. The emails, I only give, I don't give the emails to everyone.
Me, you'll give them into Todd, right?
No, I'll give you the content of the chat.
I
But
mean, there's a few
unless,
people that sent me their emails, but I couldn't cut and paste.
oh, if they sent it to you, if it's direct to you, yes, I think I'll be able to pull that out for you, yes. If it was sent directly to you. We can work on that later at the end here. We'll get that straightened out, however that works. I see what you're saying now. Before we go to Bradley, I did forget, and I apologize, Janet. This is Janet from Florida. And Janet joined us at our last session. She was invited by a friend, Hazel Simonette, who I knew back in Wisconsin 30 years ago. Well, no, not that long, more like 20, when we did racial and diversity work at the UW-Madison and UW system campuses. And Janet came and then got on the email list. And I'd like to share with everyone, because this is just such a phenomenal thing here. And you talk about organic. This is an example of it, just like Adrian and Nancy's. Janet says, "Hi, I'm Janet in Integrity Matters. This has been a wonderful learning and sharing. I'm interested in working further on racial healing and am working with the Presencing Institute at MIT on a project, Racial Healing for Systemic Change and Social Justice." This is out of MIT, folks. "I've written Todd and Phyllis. Is it appropriate for me to share my email with others interested in this work?" And yes, it most certainly is. I will include Janet's information as well in the email. So if you don't capture it in the chat, don't worry, you'll get it in the email. So that's a wonderful offer, a collaboration, you know, that this space is, God willing, born some fruit to. So that really touches me, you know, when these things come out, because it just, yeah, it's just really special. So thank you so much, Janet. And we feel you with heart. Thank you. So let's go to Bradley. Are you still there, Bradley?
I am here. And first of all, hey, Todd, I'm married. Your wife, Allison, is my cousin. Oh, hi, cousin. And my question is, I'm just looking for some, you know, some guidance. The Peoria Baha'i community is very small, and at the moment is, you know, predominantly white. Peoria is one of those towns that is listed as one of the worst for blacks in America. And locally, recently, the city council and the county commission have established a joint commission for racial unit equity and justice. Two of the Baha'is, myself included, have asked for membership on that. It has not been fully formed yet. We know we're not going to influence much, but we want to be the lump that leavens, as the writings say. What can we do?
I have this little thing I wrote here for, where did it go? Oh, I just wrote this little thing about, hold on, I gotta look for this, about if you're in an all white or predominantly white community. And why can't I find it? And I have so many notes here.
Please share that with us.
It's just
A lot of folks need that, ask for that,
a
really.
little bit of thing, but I can't. I gotta find it. I got all these pieces of digital paper open all over my laptop.
Sure.
Well, Todd, maybe you can say something like really brilliant while I'm looking for this, okay?
He's leaving you to
You
yourself.
got brilliance left in you. It's not 10 o'clock yet. You can do it.
No, you're I mean, I don't know what anybody can do in any circumstance. I mean, obviously, first thing, prayer and collective prayer and intention. I mean, and really, I'm saying that I'm learning much more about the power of intention, about a collective intention, of setting a clear intention. This is what we want to happen, and collectively praying about it. But I do think, and even something as simple as a prayer gathering, there's a theme of racial justice. And you read some of the writings, you have a consultation, a study circle in book 1. And some people are going through those study circles in book 1, and they're looking at, they're using that as a way to not only go through book 1 and see how people resonate with the quotes, also see how some of those quotes relate to addressing issues of race that can naturally be brought up. The betterment of the world can be accomplished through pure and goodly deeds. Let people resonate with that for themselves, but also then bring in race. I mean, but I think just using themes of race in devotional gatherings and or study circles is one thing. I don't have a magic bullet on that, but I think I've heard a lot of people talk about when they set these intentions, something happens. So.
Very good. Thank you.
So I just found this little thing we wrote here. This was just something I think Todd and I were talking about one day, and I happened to write it down. If you live in an all-white area, because a lot of times, we're talking about, okay, you want to connect and interact with the Black folks in your town. What if there aren't any? What if you're in,
Right.
Western or Eastern Oregon or something, So if you live in an all-white area, pray specifically for the pupil of the eye. And ask, help me understand how to accomplish this. The other white people that you teach may do something spectacular if you are conveying to them the importance of the role of these populations. So maybe you're only teaching white folks, but you don't know what they're going to do and where they're going to go. And so that to me, I don't know, I just found that really, really inspiring, and it made me, I just was hoping to have an opportunity to tell this story of this woman named Annette Cox. And I'll see if I can tell it really briefly. I think she lived in Texas, or she lived out west somewhere, and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She didn't have any family. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they were going to start chemo. And she said, no, I think I'll just travel instead. And they said, you're not going to live very long. And she said, that's okay. So she got in a little RV, little travel trailer, and she started driving east, praying as she drove to be, given a sign when she was supposed to stop. And she stopped in Clarksville, Tennessee. And then she started looking for Black women to become friends with. And she wasn't there very long. She stayed in a little RV park that my husband and I ended up parking our RV in later. And she passed away very shortly after that. And when Jean and I arrived in Clarksville, and we asked the Baha'is, what would you like us to do? They said, well, here's a list of people that Annette Cox visited and knew. Would you go visit them? Took this list, and we went out. We started visiting these folks, and they were all Black women. And some of them didn't even know she had died. And these women could not stop talking about how she had impacted their lives. It was one of the most moving experiences of our whole time on the road. So here this woman who was terminally ill got in her RV and took off, and started making these connections and changing the lives of these people that she connected with. So when you say the yeast, I think if you've ever baked bread, you know that when you bake bread, you put in all this flour, right? And a little bit of liquid. And then you put in this tiny little bit of yeast, it's so small. If you forget to put it in and then you bake it, you've got concrete, right? put it in and you heat it up and you mix it in together and it raises the entire mass, and so you've got bread. And this is what we can do, because with the word of God, we are this yeast. We do have this inherent ability because of our, well, I shouldn't say inherent ability, but we have the potential to have that ability if we're channeling the word of God to just yeast the entire group of people that we're with, and it is just such a phenomenal thing to see. So I just wish you so much dedication and detachment from the inevitable.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Todd, about the intent. That is definitely going to be something we're going to consult about. So thank you.
I'm going to check and see if Allison's listening and let her know you're here.
Yes, I definitely am. Good to see you, Brad. Say hello to Uncle Dick. And my
I will
cousin.
do that. In fact, he's in the room. I'd show him, but he's not dressed for Zoom. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. A question, Phyllis. That story you just shared, is that in one of your books? I know you have one or two out there, so.
I have one book out there, and
Okay.
I co-wrote it, and it's not in that book, but it will be in the next book that I will be working on over this next year.
Okay, because that's a wonderful story. And I just wanted to add a brief comment about, the challenges of living in a predominantly white community. And that is, and often, not always, but often those communities are quite well off. Deputize someone to go live and work in a neighborhood. Deputize someone who perhaps can't make that move. And they need not be white. It could be an African American or an indigenous person that you deputize and support them to help them do that work. That can be another consideration as well, because in fact, for many Baha'is that are not, or people generally, this isn't Baha'i specific at all. But if you don't understand a culture, it's just like you need to do the same kind of study and research and learning that you would do if you were going to go overseas to be an international pioneer. It's the same prep work, and you have the same culture shock that you would experience learning something new. And we deputize people to do that. Why not deputize people to do that here in the United States to help us spread that yeast around? Okay, thank you. Okay, Julia had a comment about music, and then Van.
I want to defer to Van because I'm interested in what he has to say. Thank you.
Okay, Julia. Now, Van, we're up on the 10 o'clock hour, and Todd and Phyllis are going to be leaving soon. So
we're good. We're good for.
You're good for a while.
I want to hear what Van has to say.
Nobody's going to leave when Van starts talking. No,
okay, all right.
I'll make mine short. I can make mine short.
Welcome, Van.
So much of, good to be here. So much of what I've heard is some of the stuff that I've dealt with as well. I'm living in the Wilmette area. And of course, in the Wilmette area, it is white predominantly and exclusive predominantly. In the Baha'i community, it's very difficult to talk about race. When I came out of a cluster meeting about 12 years ago, and out of that meeting, I said I would have a devotional. I did. I've had a devotional from all that time. But over the past 4 years or so, I started not just saying prayers and going around the room, because many of the Baha'is would say, I don't see color. We believe in one human family. Everything is wonderful. And half of the group would not be Baha'is, and would be the people who are not Baha'is who would have to step and say, oh no, you see color. And so I started thinking about this group of people that were gathering each month, just one time a month. I don't have a web page, but one time a month, and we would say some prayers up front or read poems or whatever people felt comfortable doing, but we tried to do it spiritually, and then have some discussion about race. Then came pandemic after 2 years of going really well. And I was already at the point of not knowing how, other than when you talk about community building, I could see community building. I could see it with the Baha'is and the people who are not Baha'is. Unbelievable friendships started developing. And so now we can't meet every, once a month in my house. And the first time I did a Zoom, we had some of those people gathered on the Zoom, and we still were talking about, well, we'd like to keep going. And then it became, let me try having a few African Americans answer a few questions that go deep into when they first were aware of race, even to what does a white person do to me now that just runs me crazy, and I don't say anything about it. Now, these are people who, a lot of them are not Baha'is, but some are Baha'is as well. But the stories have been things that we have not shared. We've not felt comfortable enough to talk to each other about. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make somebody feel uncomfortable. And these sessions have not really done that at all. And so now we've added white people also answering questions. One of them, I'll ask all of you here, if you're white, the last question I ask is, do you have a real good Black friend? And if you do, can you tell me how you got that Black friend? And what would you recommend for others to do? Well, now we all had to think about, who were white had to think about, do I have a Black friend?
Right.
And that's not the person that comes to feast, Baha'is, not the person who comes to feast or serves on the assembly, the only one you have on the assembly.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that person until you start breaking bread together, calling every other day, just having good time connecting. That's the community building piece. So anyway, this is going well, and it's a group about this size as well. It's once a month. It has spread. There's a Rotary Club up in a very exclusive area of Illinois where there are no Black people, period. And a couple of them came and said, I'd like to have it up here. Can you host one here? So some of their club members, certainly not Baha'is, but the Baha'is are members of Rotary clubs too, but here, there are no Baha'is. It's just they selected 4 or 5 of their own members to answer the questions that I posed to the white people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm providing 4 or 5 Black people from around the country to answer the questions for them. I'm using Baha'is and not Baha'is. The challenge I have is surely this is Baha'i, but it's not. Let's read a lot of passages from the writings.
Mm-hmm.
It's more, let's see if we can learn to know each other a little better. And even on Zoom, it's beginning to happen. And so it's I have to plan way ahead to be able to have it on. And it's coming up this coming Wednesday. But I've just finishing out the program as well right now. So I think it'll go. I only planned it through April, but I had no idea it would be like it is. So I had to go up to a 500 Zoom limit, and I committed to 6 months of it. Now it seems like being able to talk about race in really a non-threatening, really kind of loving way. But mostly it's hearing stuff I never heard.
Mm-hmm.
Black people who are hearing Black people talk say, you know, I thought I was the only one that happened to. Others are saying, what? This person is a distinguished person. I can't believe he went through this. So it's been and then came the letter of 22 July. And I said, oh my God, it's like I was getting ready for it. It talks about intimate conversations. That's what we had. Then it talks about love. You know, that paragraph before the last paragraph? It's just all full of love. Then it says in the third paragraph, it takes all of us, not just Black folk, not just white folk. It takes all of us to have this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what we're working at. And this is what seems to be working. And a lot of you come, but some of you who haven't, try it. Maybe I put my email address there. If you send me an email and say, please let me know. But anybody who has one, just forward it. Right now, I've opened it. I was being very selective, trying to just have a few people in case it was just so bad, I wouldn't feel bad that I had spread this all over the place. But now I've just opened it and said, okay, anybody can come, anybody who wants to come. In my area, ministers and their churches are coming.
Yes.
I can't believe it. But it's because of the atmosphere.
Right.
It's because of the feeling of learning. And then at the end, we try to give people an example of something you might be able to do. And we're concentrating on that this time as well. What can I do when I leave here? And that's been the big question in my area. What can I do? And I say, well, I've been talking about it for 7 decades almost, and I can't hardly tell there's any change. So it's going to be a long time. It's going to be a very long time. Anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Thank you so much, Fan. I've had the privilege to attend one of your sessions. I haven't been able to make some of the others. Phyllis indicated she'd been at one too, and it was quite interesting. It was really very, very good. And we've gotten some comments in the chat. There are people here tonight who have been to several of yours, and that's a wonderful thing. And it's wonderful to hear these kind of outcomes of what's happening, how that nucleus has expanded to other groups, Rotary, churches, you know, and so on. Not everyone needs to be a Baha'i to change this culture. It'd be nice, but you know, independent investigation of truth, right? But it's so wonderful, you know, that you have this forum and that you've got that 500 capacity. That's awesome. That's awesome. So there was one comment here that I really want to share. All of the comments that you folks are sharing in here, you know, that are addressing one way or another the conversation, that's all going to get included in the email because they're substantive. Okay, they're not saying, oh yeah, that was a good point. No, I'm not going to send that. But if you say something substantive, that will be included in the chat with your name attached to it. So everyone has the benefit of your knowledge, your learning, your insight as well. But there's one here that was really an epiphany for me. And because I spoke on it actually too. Oh shoot, I just lost it here. And it's from, I think it was from Elaine. And several good comments about what to do if you're in a predominantly white community. Oh yeah, this is from Elaine also. And Elaine said, another awareness of white Baha'is must develop, including Black Baha'is. I have to say, I'm gonna put myself in this one too, Elaine, is that all Black Baha'is are pioneers in their Baha'i communities. Ain't that the truth? Yes, I mean, unless maybe you're in a big metro area, right? You know, or something like that. That is so right on. And you go on to say, they have left their home community to become strangers in a strange land, the definition of a pioneer. We found a new home, Baha'u'llah's home, but it still can be a strange land, and making that adjustment from a cultural perspective, but certainly not, on the spiritual side of things. But that's a very awesome point. I thank you for putting that out there. And for Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, just first of all, I always appreciate Van on so many levels. And what he was saying about these folks being not Baha'is and this camaraderie they're developing. I mean, I feel like that's the real deal. I mean, I live in a 90. I live the opposite where Van lives. I live in a 95% African American neighborhood, probably 99% African American neighborhood. And we've been doing the community building activities, devotionals, children's classes, study circles, all of that. Study circles and all that with Black folks, and there's one white person, but 99% Black. And really, first of all, I love my broader DC community, but I'm kind of isolated over here where I live. And so those folks who are not Baha'is are like our Baha'i community. They're like our community. They become like our community because we're so intimate friends, and we're serving together, and we're praying together, and we're doing study circles together. And those folks have become my community, and they're not Baha'is. 90% of most of them aren't Baha'is. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. I think that's beautiful. They understand the spirit of Baha'u'llah. They understand all these things. Of course, it would be wonderful if they are Baha'is, but it's like, that's community. I think that's what we're supposed to do, build these communities.
Right. That's right. We're not the only ones changing this world. It's truly going to be a collaborative effort, but we have very clear plans about what we need to be doing. In today's talk, that distinctive contribution, that's helping us identify the most effective way for us to make that contribution, as well as changing the hearts and minds of the wider community and walking hand in hand with those who are like-minded. Absolutely.
So can I tell you, I share a little funny behind the scenes
Yes.
story?
Yes.
Anytime you ever talk about a book, you've got to have a little behind the scenes story.
Oh, good.
I'm getting nervous. I can tell by his
what's this one?
His dimples get a certain way when I start talking. So we were working, I thought of this because of what Van said, and then this July 22nd letter came along, right? So we were working with Palabra Publishing, and we were beginning to, this process of tidying up the version of the manuscript and sending it to the publisher. And at one point, we thought we were done. I mean, we really thought we were done. And, Todd had poured all of this wonderful, compilation gift into the effort and his comments, and it was really great, and so the guy we were talking to at Palabra, he said, so, is this it? And we said, yeah, what else could we put in there? I mean, short of the House of Justice writing another letter about race, what else is there? And I think you checked your email, Todd, right? At that point, or something crazy like that. We're like, what? There's another letter from the House of Justice about race. And so it, then it was another couple months before it got finished after that. It was one of those moments where you think that can't be real. All right, I'm done.
That's a wonderful story. Todd?
And all right, since you brought the Philip, I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to say it now. This is one of these things, every now and then you get these little things that happen that that are personal to you, and they touch your heart. As we're having that conversation, literally, that happened. And July 22nd is also my birthday. So getting that letter while we're talking about it, on my birthday was like a gift a double gift from heaven, from just a personal standpoint. It just felt Wow. So every time I look at July 22nd, I think, oh, what a blessing. That's just personal. But, you know, I do just want to share this about, just repeat, as African Americans, Indigenous people, and this is coming up in so many spaces. You know, Barbara Talley has many spaces, and other folks are, Charles Bullock and some others are creating, many people are creating spaces to address these issues, and African Americans we are feeling that it's our time, and not from any arrogant way, but from the sense of we've been called to do this. The writings call us to do this, and so it's emerging everywhere. And what I'm, you know, as challenging as some of the community building processes have been for African Americans, you know, quite frankly, having to fit into a rigid formula sometimes, right? That you know, come in and they do the study circles a certain way, the devotional a certain way, and sometimes African Americans just haven't wanted any part of it, just because it's not speaking to us, right? And that's why I read that part at the end of this compilation, where the House of Justice told, fundamentally, they weren't speaking to us, but they basically said, make it your own. Deal with your own cultural realities, you know, and use the system, but make it your own within the context of your own cultural realities. But but use the system, because we got to have a system. You know, if we don't have a system, we're not going to get rid of systemic racism. And that's what I think Phyllis had said. And also, I want to remind people of some of the things that are in book 6. And we have that in the end of the compilation, but we have just some headings at the end of the compilation. And what's in book 6 deals with this is about dealing with, you know, cultural sensitivity and just
briefly, not everyone will know what book 6 is. Could you just tell folks?
Okay, so the educational process that the Baha'is often refer to as a Ruhi process, but it's the institute process. There's a number of books. There's a curriculum that we go through to actually empower us to serve our communities, to empower everybody to serve community, right? And it's about capacity building, and the books build on each other. The services to the community build on each other. And one of the books is book 6. It's teaching. It's about teaching. And so how do we engage with other people? And so I just want to read again some of the things that it tells us we need to address within ourselves. It addresses purity of heart. And then it addresses what if our intentions are not pure, but we can pretend and convince others they are. Okay. I mean, these are real things. Some of the impurities that come easily: seeking recognition, ambition, sense of superiority, confusing kindness with paternalism. When we have difficulty seeing capacity in others, we can be paternalistic. Hypocrisy can also be presented as kindness. We should not belittle anyone, view them as ignorant. Protection from self-importance. Deciding to try something because it was done elsewhere. Then the opposite, rejecting approach is done elsewhere.
Right.
You know, so these are all kind of categories of things that book 6 addresses to help us prepare ourselves for how we engage with other human beings, having to think about those things and incorporate those hopefully into our ways of being, engage.
Todd, is the rumor true that today's your birthday also?
No, July 22nd, when the July 22nd.
Okay. Someone on the chat was congratulating you on your birthday.
Well, okay, you can send me a present if you want. I'll save it to July 22nd.
Okay, I thought I better clear that up pretty quick.
No.
A letter that was in conjunction with his birthday then.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
It's the July 22nd letter that was in conjunction.
Oh, okay.
But I just want to say, I did put it in the chat box. I'm Kay Larson. I'm in Wrangell, Alaska, and I did become a Baha'i in your home, Todd. And
can you get Kay on the spotlight, Nason? There she is.
Yeah, it was 80 years ago. No, that I was born.
But also, everything you've said resonates with what I'm engaged in here in country, Southeast Alaska Indigenous people.
Mm.
Really listening hard to what you all have said. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. And please invite them to join us. Okay, well, it's 10:19. Let's see, we cleaned up the birthday misconception here on my part. Now we all know when your real birthday is, Todd. So who knows what's going to happen on the 22nd and 21. Let's see. All right. We have 78 people still here. We're not ready to go home yet, which is always wonderful. But it is almost 10:30. Is there anyone, I'd like to go back to Colleen and Elaine. You know, they both expressed an issue or a concern. I'd like to invite you, you know, to come up and, you know, share that with us, and perhaps we can have some conversation on that as well. So Colette Hanson and Elaine Montgomery, if either of you are still with us.
Yeah, I'm still here. This is Colette, and there's Elaine.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Elaine,
Hey, Todd.
Why don't you go, Elaine?
Hi, Colette.
There we go.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, let's have Colette.
No, it was more just
Okay.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. It's all right. I'm sorry I interrupted you. You go ahead, Elaine.
Okay. So it was just really coming down back to the becoming comfortable with discomfort question. And I think just even with this, the cultural piece fits into that as well, because, you know, as Todd was mentioning many times, when people of color enter our communities, they don't feel welcome because it is not a familiar environment to them. It's very much a white-centered environment or European-centered environment culturally. And so many times when I've seen people of color try to share or to offer their cultural experience or their, you know, contribute to the space, many times it makes white Baha'is or, you know, European people uncomfortable. And because we live in a society that is about keeping white people comfortable, it's one of these kind of like, you know, it can be a delicate balance, but it's one thing that I've really been trying to be aware of and become aware of in spaces, especially more and more now that we're on Zoom, being able to recognize when people are uncomfortable and help shift the space in terms of, as Todd mentioned, acknowledging people of color in the space, especially when they are starting to share and then many times become made invisible, or people become part of this white discomfort becomes, I'm uncomfortable with that, so let's move on, right? It becomes this, you know, the moving and all these, you know, there's nonverbal stuff that goes on in the spaces. And so usually what happens is, this has been my experience, is that white people want to move on. They want to, oh, that didn't happen, you know. So keeping it back centered to the people of the eye and being able to say, wait a minute, this just happened. That was really beautiful. Let's stay with that for a minute. And acknowledging that. And personally, I found that starting to happen, like, you know, and especially if, because the other dynamic that happens is sometimes people of color become a little bit uncomfortable with that, because then all of a sudden the attention's on them and they're being put on the spot. So being able to shift that, and if you've got people, my experience has been, in a devotional very similar to what Phyllis's devotional was, where there was a couple of women of color who shared, and that shift started to happen, but they were really powerful and strong enough to stay with it and be like, yeah, I'm staying with this. And then when they stayed with it, and when the white people in this space were able to be okay with that and be okay in their discomfort, the space shifted in just this beautiful way. So just wanting to hear more ideas and see other people's experiences in that, because I think it's really a powerful thing in terms of group dynamics that we can all contribute to. Just my thoughts. Thank you. Good to see you, Todd. And everyone, Sherilyn, Phyllis, Colette.
Well, would we like to go ahead and address Elaine's comments, and then we'll move on to Colette. Jeffrey, and then Deborah.
Yeah, what I just wanted to respond to what she said, what Elaine said. First up, to say that to my brother and Phyllis that they did a great job, and I really appreciate it. And I think you know, I've been doing a lot of thinking about, of course, the people of the eye. I've been thinking about the importance of it. I mean, Barbara Talley's been doing a thing. I've been going to pretty much every Friday night, just especially for the people of the eye. And it's been like a really eye-opening experience for me. And I think that it reinforces who we are. It gives us a certain kind of inner strength that we don't have if we don't know who we are, what our purpose is clearly. I mean, we've all heard the term people of the eye. It's been around since I've been a Baha'i, and we just didn't know what it meant. And the more we understand what it means, the more strength we have to stand up in that position that was just addressed, to step into the moment, and to have the courage to say, hey, I'm not asking you if it's okay if I say this. I'm saying this is how I see it, and I'm standing here with this, and I'm not asking for your acceptance. I don't need you to like me. I just need to be able to say what I think in an honest way, and then just stand there. And because I believe this too, that people, years ago I read this book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to have the courage to stand up on your own, right? Stand up, because someone else, they may be white, they may be black, but someone else will stand up and support you. As long as you know who you are, as long as your intention is love and unity and doing Baha'u'llah's work. And I think the more we as Black people embrace who we are as the people of the eye, the more, the less, how to say this, the less Black people will be coming into the community and then leaving. We will come in to stay because we understand we have an ownership here, and that nothing anybody says can change that. But that's, I say, for me, that's been very important to understand that on a very deep level, that we have a job to do. And like Todd said earlier, we have a job, it's an assignment from Baha'u'llah. And when we're clear about that, we'll be able to stand in that space and take the heat and be happy for it. But I want to share something real quick with, I know, well, no, I don't want, I'll stop because nothing I say is quick.
You, Jeffrey. Deborah, was it?
Yes. Hi again, Phyllis and Todd. Thank you so much. A wonderful presentation. It's a wonderful space. I'm really enjoying this evening's conversation. I'm in a very white area of Ohio, and I'm really having a hard time making any inroads with anybody, like any human being in my space, especially people of color who have tried to engage. And it's been challenging. There is one individual who is non-white in our Baha'i community. And I find that I sense that he feels very uncomfortable, even going in and connecting with emotion and being honest with what he shares with certain questions. But we're doing in the state of Ohio, we've engaged a strategy called prayer rings, in which 4 or 5 people might be in a ring, and person A calls B and B calls C and C calls D until the ring finishes. And they're smaller, intimate conversations that allow for us to begin to build stronger relationships with one another, as opposed to, okay, we're at a gathering, it's a 19-day feast, it's this or it's that. We say hi, we talk on a surface level, but we don't get to know one another very well at all. So what's really wonderful about the prayer rings is that we're having the opportunity for 2 people within a community that knows each other's names and faces, not much more, to really begin to deepen those relationships. And so one of my links in that ring is with this person of color. And we're really beginning to build a much stronger, fuller, honest, connected relationship together. And it's really wonderful. So I just wanted to share that as something that it's a strategy that we're using in this state and in the region, really, and offering it for others that might be interested. That's, I did have questions about the other part of my concern, but that it's too long and involved. So perhaps on another venue, I'll be able to connect with some people personally and go deeper with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And feel free to put it in the chat if you think you can get it in the chat, and you might get some responses, people to connect with you today while you're here. Todd, Phyllis? Todd, you're thinking? He's going to say something in a minute, I can tell. And then we'll go to Colette after Phyllis and Todd have had their opportunity to respond.
I just keep thinking of these qualities that we're to exhibit. I mean, it's stunning to me that an entire community building process that is designed to transform the world, like we saw in that PowerPoint, is all predicated on a posture of humility. The entire process of transforming community, which Abdu'l-Baha most perfectly exhibited, right? I mean, he was the essence of humility, our perfect example, and the entire community building process is predicated on that. And when you engage, as Van said, as Deborah said, if you engage with humility, then you have to think, what does that look like in this situation? What does that look like in this conversation? What does that look like in this interaction? You know, because the entire community building process, the House of Justice said, begins with a conversation and a strand of love. I mean, so basic, right? So profound, but so basic. And that's what I was hearing in this prayer. You know, you're connected through prayer, which hopefully touches those well springs in all of us, that tap that part of us. And the reason I think that the devotional gatherings, these study circles, these other spaces are so important is because our emotions around race are so volatile. They're just volatile for good reason, right? And prayer and study of the creative word doesn't necessarily erase it, or it should, but it helps us transcend it and use it, right, in a whole different way. But if we're not in a prayerful mode, if we're not in a creative word mode, you know, it doesn't take, I'll tell you for myself, it doesn't take much for me to come from my low nature when it comes to stuff with race. I mean, when I walk around the house by myself, I hope Baha'u'llah is now listening, because sometimes my lower nature can kick in quick, right? But in these spaces, when we can create that environment of prayer and then just connect, because people want to be connected with, genuinely connected with, right? And I think prayer and what she was talking about can create that, and then people hopefully will want to open up and share, you know? I don't know, I was feeling what she was, I was feeling the spirit of that connection that she was talking about.
Just something. Can I say something real quick?
Who's that?
Yeah, Abdul Baha, humble, right? But you talk about intentionality, right?
Yes.
You talk
Yes.
about somebody with commitment. I mean, some people forget that, you know, the strength that they had of, you know, they weren't moving. And I want to, what I was going to share before, and since Todd brought that up, I want to share this quote on commitment that I've always liked. Until one is committed, there is a hesitancy, a chance to draw back, always ineffective. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. At the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help when they never otherwise would have occurred. A whole stream of events issued from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen assistance and material assistance that no man could have dreamt would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. That wasn't perfect. I bumbled a couple things, but you got the idea. And it is who, in my mind, that's who Abdul Baha was in such a gentle way. The gentle strength, that humility and that strength. And that's what we're all saying we all have to be. And it's not an easy thing to do. And but we're trying.
Mm-hmm. Can you please cite that in the chat, Jeffrey, or send it to me so I can include it with all the other great comments shared this evening?
Yeah. If I can figure out how to do that, I'm really bad with this stuff.
Okay, or you could just email it to me.
Yeah, can I get your? I'll get your email from Todd. Todd has it, right?
Oh yeah, let me put it in the chat. That'll be easier. Can you get it out of the chat, Jeffrey?
I'll try.
Okay, because I know Todd's got all kinds of stuff going on.
He's my brother. I feel like I can call him if I want.
Oh, that's your brother?
That's
Seriously?
my brother.
Brother,
Yeah.
brother?
Brother.
Same mother?
Same mother.
Same mother.
Oh,
Same
wow.
father.
I didn't
Same
know
father,
that.
too.
Oh, okay, then go ahead and call your brother. I'm going to need it soon. That's the only thing. So I can get it out.
I'll get it to you within what, 24 hours?
All right, that's smoking. That's awesome. Thank you.
Can't you see
You're
the
welcome.
similarity? Oh my gosh, when I see them both on the screen like this.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I did not know. I'm sorry.
All right.
It's all right.
You're forgiven this time.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Jennifer, I see you've raised your hand. Is it about what we were just discussing? Because Colette's waiting.
I can go after Colette. It's a story about the people of the eye being centered in the Institute process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer. Colette, thank you for waiting so patiently.
Thank you for allowing me a time and a space. And actually, from the time I posted my thought earlier to now, a lot has sort of changed for me. And part of that, well, and Phyllis, I don't know you as far as, you know, connecting. I've been in a lot of different places where you have been, but Todd and I have gone back and forth with all sorts of things over 20 years now, or thereabouts. And I was thinking after I posted my comment about a letter that you wrote, Todd, to the One Human Family workshops when we were first starting out, and the importance of what we were trying to do. And, you know, 20 some odd years later, we're still doing it, which is to bring people who ordinarily would not mix together to have frank and honest dialogue. And I guess what I posted before was about my feelings of inadequacy in making the significant connections between all of the race unity work I do and how that fits into what I'm facilitating in study circles, in different study circles. And yet there were 6 people from different study circles that I facilitate who were in this group tonight. So something's happening. And I think one of the things that I became aware of in this time I've been waiting to talk is that probably my biggest contribution needs to be making sure I create a safe space. And it's not up to me to create it. It's just up to me to allow that to happen and to guard against it not happening. It's to see when there are those moments. There's one person who was here before, left earlier, who said, you know, we have to make room for people to say, ouch. And to be with them and find out more about what the ouch is all about. And so I think I answered my own question. But it's, and I'm finding that it's almost, I'm in a lot of different circles that are not Baha'i as well. And in some ways I'm finding it easier to be a Baha'i in those circles and to share all of this. Big, you know, and there a lot of times people, where are you coming from? You know, what is it? Well, I'm a Baha'i. It's been quite a journey. And there's one person who I'm now doing some Ohio Poor People's Campaign things who's coming into a book too. And, you know, looking at that as it's not a rising to serve the Baha'i community, it's a rising to serve humanity. And I guess that was sort of in the back of my mind when I posted my thing of, that's such an important undertaking. And how do I ensure that I bring the conversations, or that I allow space and encourage the conversations about race to be part of that? So that's what I'm left with. Over to you.
You're left with that question, and that question then becomes, you know, the motivating force for you to figure it out, you know. But that question is always in your head. How do I do this? How do I do this? How can that work in this setting? How can it be authentic in that setting? You know, how can I do this in such a way where I'm not centering myself, but I'm still showing up? You know, so it's that
one of the things I've done for forever, ever since I became a Baha'i and learned it, is I usually, whenever I go into any of those situations, sing to myself, "Oh God, make me a hollow reed." And I've had situations in non-Baha'i workshops where, you know, the planning has been, you know, and we're going to do this, and then this is the next step, and so on. And then when we take a break, some of the members of my team will say, well, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Why not? And I said, because that's not what God put in my mouth. And so I think I need to stop second guessing myself and just trust that process. So thank you, Phyllis.
Colette, I just want to say thank you for your consistency over all these years.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think this is what it takes. I mean, one of the things that you know, rubs people the wrong way is that when people feel like they can take time off and say, well, okay, I'm not going to deal with race anymore because I'm tired of it. We all have to deal with gender issues. As a man, I have to deal with gender issues. I can't say, okay, I think I'm not going to do that for a couple of weeks or a month, or that's, you know, it's too hard. I can't take it, but we can't. And you've been at it for
a long time.
She's done some profound stuff. I mean, sometimes those who know her know that, but she's really done some very meaningful, expansive stuff.
Thank you. It's a lot of awesomeness that's been in this room tonight, a whole lot. And brings me to tears. Okay, let me not say anymore. I'm gonna start crying here. Jennifer, are you still here?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
You are. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Jen.
Phyllis, Charlene, and Todd, what an honor to be here. And Colette, I'm going to strive to be like you. So in many ways starting the journey. But when Elaine, my powerful soul sister, just spoke right now about being uncomfortable, it's a blessing because Shoghi Effendi called us to make a supreme effort, not just a moderate one, but a supreme effort for the white. And he gave us a specific list. He gave me a specific list because he knew how we thought. We all need lists. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to give an example of some patronizing things I have said implementing. I was ATC secretary full-time in San Diego for 5 years. And some of the patronizing things that I have said, which now I realize has been harmful, is saying things like, we're going to teach them how to pray. Mm-hmm. And another thing that is still being said by Homefront pioneers in focused neighborhoods are phrases like, we're going to help them on their journey towards Baha'u'llah. Right. And completely unintentional of just how condescending and those words are examples of the very patronizing attitude, which comes from this inherent and at times subconscious. It's not always subconscious. A lot of times it's conscious. We're going to teach them how to pray, and maybe not feeling that way in that moment, but not realizing just how patronizing that is. And it is immediately probably protecting others from us and from me. So I wanted to sort of voice that because that's an example of actions that I need to do in implementing the framework for action, in trying to invite people to core activities, or talking to parents about the children's classes and things like that. So I wanted to give my personal examples of that in the implementation process and how that has hampered and stymied the growth of our communities, because it's about relationships, intimate relationships. The second thing I wanted to say is that, like Jeffrey was saying, the pupil of the eye isn't just a pretty metaphor and nice flowery imagery from Baha'u'llah. I'm going to say that again. The pupil of the eye and the station of the spiritual leadership that is given to the pupil of the eye, those of African descent, isn't just a pretty metaphor to be dismissed. It is a powerful, powerful example for us to think at the level of implication of what that means. And when Jeffrey and Todd and everybody describes that the people of the eye are now taking their place at the forefront and leading us spiritually, this will lead to the salvation of not just us in America, but the whole world. So, and just finally, this concept of, in the Junior Youth Program, the very representation is everything, and it's extremely powerful. And so in animating the Junior Youth Program, the very first book that we do, and usually the first book is the one we do most often, just like book 1 is the one we tend to do most often. The very first book, Breezes of Confirmation, is about how we make decisions. Mm-hmm. And the example that is given to us is that of 4 children in Africa: Godwin, Chishimba, Musanda, and Rose. And when we often do that, and this is when someone asks the wonderful question, we're all white people, what do we do? Well, you teach this, and the first question they ask is, how do we pronounce these names, right? And it is wonderful because it is their names. And just so that we know, I think most people know that these are real people. This isn't a fantasy story. Musanda was a counselor. She probably still is a counselor in Africa. So Musanda is a real person, and the book centers on her and how to make decisions. So the pupil of the eye has been elevated by this very text, and they show us how to make decisions. She teaches us what it's like to listen to God as an 11-year-old and how she's going to make decisions, along with her brother Godwin and Chishimba and Rose. The second book is also in Africa, centered on Kibomi, who is our second hero. So our first heroine, our first Shiro, is Musanda, and she's 11. And then our 12-year-old hero after that, our superhero, truly superhero, is Kibomi. And he's from the Adumba tribe. And again, people are like, how do you pronounce that? And there's no answer, because you know, and white people want to know the answer. Like, what's the answer? It's got to be right or wrong. So I just wanted to sort of throw the power of just those and the effect that it has on everyone, even when we don't have the blessing of having won and earned the trust of the people of the eye yet. But if we can do that and and take ourselves away and center the culture of Black America and center the culture of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, the world is waiting for us to do that.
You're always deep, Jennifer. What can I say? I do want to say something to respond to that because, well, first, I'm just so glad you brought that up. And I never thought of the junior youth book that way, or the adult book too on accompaniment in that way. And you've really opened my eyes to that. But what really moves me the most is my memory of doing book one with youth, with all Black youth. And it was the first time they saw something, read something, there were names they knew how to say, you know, and they felt, wow, this is about me. I'm in this book. You know, people that look like me are in this book. And how that empowers a child is just, oh, it's just amazing. It is just amazing. But you've opened my eyes to a bigger wisdom in how those books were put together. Were put together, and I thank you for that. It's awesome.
Ditto. Sherilyn, I'm going to have to sign off here. I'm getting old.
Okay.
This has been wonderful, and I want to thank everybody and hope we can continue to learn together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it takes.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. Before
farewells as well.
Yeah, before you go, Phyllis, were you able to get the emails you needed?
I was not. I tried copying and pasting the whole chat and it would not paste.
Wouldn't let you do that. I mean, I can do it, but what's direct message to someone, only that person will see. So if you can hang around and can take the time to go back through there, we can hang on here a while longer.
I can do that. Yeah.
So you can get those emails. And anyone that's still here on the call, if you had sent a direct message to Phyllis and you want to reach out to her, just put it in the chat. Or you can send it to me and just say for Phyllis, and I'll make sure that she gets it. And I won't do anything else with your email.
That would be good. Best.
You know, if you want to go to Phyllis or Todd, you know, I'll get it to them. You're not going to get put on the list unless you ask me to. So let me offer that for those of you that are still on the call. We usually wrap up. Oh my God, it's almost 11 o'clock.
I know.
Gosh, I thought it was only like 10:30. Okay, Todd. All right, I see you trying to sign off. All right, thank you guys. The rest of you can hang around for a few minutes. We're not done yet. There's still too many people in the room. There's still 40 of you here, so I know everyone's not ready to go home yet. And Armand's still here. Hey, Armand, I see you.
I'm going to say good night to everybody. And
okay, Phyllis.
I'll get connected with the people I need to be connected with.
Okay, it'll work out.
Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful, incredibly beautiful opportunity and beautiful gathering of people. This has been so sweet and special and uplifting.
You guys brought the sweetness and the upliftment with you, and we thank you. We thank both you and Todd, and for all the work you put into making tonight happen, and all the work you've done. You know, that has preceded your being here. We're very grateful. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Lot of love. Lot of love.
Good night.
And Jeffrey Bradley gave me the quote.
Oh, you got the quote?
Yeah, Bradley put it in there. He found it. We got
Okay,
some
great.
quizzes on here.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So we are kind of close to winding things up. But I thought maybe if folks had a few more comments they wanted to make,
I have.
or, you know, say some prayers or whatever, you know, on our way out for the evening, we could do that. Diane Tanning, I see your finger. What's up?
You know what? I just got to say hi to Jeffrey.
Okay.
Because he probably doesn't remember me. But back on Penn Avenue, I was about 17 years old.
Wow.
You were an actor at Southern Theater. I was Diane George. I
Oh,
haven't
yeah, I
seen
remember
you since
you.
then.
I
Yep.
remember you.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. I didn't even know where in the world you went to. I think you went to New York to be a big TV star.
Now I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, all right. Well, anyway, I wanted to say hi. I tried to put a little message in the chat for you, but you didn't know how to get it. So I just want to make sure I say hello.
I get issues that way. But,
Me too. Me too.
Yeah,
but
good. Yeah,
I
good to see you.
Hi. It's just so good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. And I do remember you. I remember George.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Well, let me holler at a few people here. Irv and Ania, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think this is your first time here, so welcome. And Sandra Lally also. And, oh, where'd she go? Oh, there's Marcia Glavis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little something. I had to leave and then I came back, so I missed some of the talk, but I'm looking forward to see it. And I had to help my grandson with Spanish, so I had to leave.
No problem. The recording will be available.
You know what? My husband was from Latvia, and his teacher in Morocco was Elsie Austin.
Oh my goodness!
And so so I wanted to tape. I mean, I saw the introduction that I had. I would love to have that. I have a picture of my husband and Elsie. They got together at the World Congress.
Can you hold it up closer to your camera? We can see it closer. Put it right up. No, other way. Keep going. Other direction.
The other way?
Other way.
Oh.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Let me take it out.
Oh yeah, she's a tiny thing, isn't she?
Yeah, my husband is
quite tall.
He was almost 6'3". And this was in high school, and he was not a Baha'i. And when I met him here in San Diego, I found out, he asked me, "Oh, you're a Baha'i?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, my teacher in Morocco was Elsie Austin, and I had two classmates, and one of them was Paddy Foster, which his grandfather was one of the first African-American that went to Africa at the request of Sheikh Effendi." So it's a little story. So I would love to have that video. Is it possible?
You will.
Get it?
You will. The link to the videos will be included in the email with all of everyone's wonderful comments and shares.
I'm going to put my email in the chat then. I
have your email, I think.
marciabalgalvez@cox.net.
Okay, we'll put it in again, but I'm pretty sure I remember you signing up before, I thought.
Yes, I did it one time for the last time, but thank you so much. And I did appreciate all the hard work that you do.
Well, thank you for sharing that wonderful story.
I'm from San Diego. I just wanted to share that because my heart was, yes, thank you.
Oh, that must have been wonderful to see that. And Sonia and Pat and Kay and Maria Patton. Hi, Maria. How are you? Tony Pike. Hannah T. I don't think I know Hannah T. Can Hannah come off? Can we see you, Hannah? This is where I ask people to show themselves so we could see a face. Bye, Kay. Thank you so much for coming. Yes. Jennifer. Brent. Oh, there's Hannah. I have you on the email list. You don't need to put your email in there again. Judy, I'm sorry, Judy. I have you on the email list. You don't have to put it in again. So if you're not getting the emails, then let me know. Bye, Armand. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And Cynthia's hanging out with us. And Hannah, hello, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. My name's Hannah, rhymes with Ghana, and I'm calling in from Washington, D.C.
Oh, you're in DC. Okay, wonderful. It's great to have you here. Fantastic. And who else? Sandra, can we see you? And Tony? We're down to just a few. We'll leave in just a minute. Okay. Well, would anyone like to say a closing prayer or anything like that before we end for the night? Okay, Diane has gone.
I can say one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful picture you have of you and your husband, by the way.
Thank you. He passed away 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thy name is my healing, oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healer and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise.
Thank you so much, friends. Don't forget, next week, Angelita Reyes. She's a wonderful presenter and on a very, very important topic. So I hope you all can join us then. And then we're done for January, back to back, 3 in a row. That was a lot for us and for you, I'm sure. So thank you for coming. We love you. Thank you so much. And tell your friends to come too. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Lawapa.
Nice to meet you, Hannah.